Chapter 461. To get involved, you need power and influence. Second update. Lucian's words echoed in Zhang Chulan's mind as he stepped into the venue. How could this guy possibly know the deepest secret of the Jiashan rebellion? Was he bluffing? Chulan, what's wrong? Susan asked, flicking ash from his cigarette and noticing Zhang Chulan's distant expression. Zhang Chulan leaned in and repeated Lucian's astonishing claim in a low voice. Susan's eyes narrowed. I told you, Jin Baobao isn't someone to underestimate. Just then, Shusi arrived, phone in hand. You raised concerns about him last time, he said. We ran a full background check on Jin Baobao. The report just came in. He forwarded the dossier to Zhang Chulan's device. As Zhang Chulan flipped through the pages, his face went through several variations of shock and disbelief. According to the files, Jin Baobao, Lucian's stage name, enjoyed access to resources and connections far beyond what a newcomer should have. If the report was accurate, Lucian wasn't merely boasting. Yet the real question lingered. How could he have uncovered the Jiashan Rebellion's best-kept secret? I'm starting to think this guy isn't really who he claims to be, Zhang Chulan admitted, voice tinged with uncertainty. Before anyone could offer an answer, the lights dimmed, and the next performance was about to begin. All other questions would have to wait. His current strength and behavior don't match a single word of the investigation report. If he isn't Lucian but an imposter, we still can't be sure what we're dealing with. Shu San strode forward and voiced his theory. Zhang Chulan nodded in agreement. Let's hold our judgment, he said. If he truly knows the secret behind the Jiashan Rebellion, there's a lot more we need to discuss. Zhang Chulan had little interest in the origin of the Qi body or the 8 extraordinary skills. Had surrendering those secrets guaranteed his safety and revealed Feng Baobao's past life, he would have done it long ago. But until he was certain Lucian wasn't deceiving them, he wouldn't admit to possessing the Qi body's origin. After all, they'd finally rid themselves of the headache that came with being the Qi body's successor. No one wanted to backtrack now. Lucian versus Zhang Lingyu. Let the match begin. At that, the referee's voice rang out across the arena. Zhang Chulan and the others hurried to their seats among the spectators. The stands were already packed with guests attending the Luoqian Grand Ceremony, electric with anticipation. Which would prove stronger today, the Longhu Mountain Thunder Technique, or the Xiantian Thunder. Mr. Jin, I'm ready. Zhang Lingyu bowed deeply, a halo of golden light spiraling around him. Lucian Jin returned the salute with a slight nod. Master Lingyu, give it everything you've got, he said, his tone calm but unwavering. Zhang Lingyu, upright, honorable, and freshly bestowed with the Longhu Mountain Taoist teachings by Tian Jinzhong, had originally planned to hold back and spare his opponent any real humiliation. Yet the moment he beheld Lucian's steely confidence, he knew he could not afford complacency. Swallowing his pride, he channeled every ounce of his power. Northern border Kang Tan. With that cry, Zhang Lingyu summoned the pitch-black wrath of Yin Thunder. In an instant, inky bolts of lightning writhed and coalesced around him before surging outward, engulfing Lucian from all sides in a tempest of crackling darkness. 30 minutes later, absolutely spent, Zhang Lingyu finally halted. The black storm dissipated, and there, standing unharmed, was Lucian Jin, not a single hair out of place. A red flush crept across Lingyu's face as he lowered his head in defeat. I yield. For a time, Lingyu had refused to unleash the full corruption of his Yin Thunder, clinging instead to a more refined, perfected version. But when none of those strikes could even graze Lucian, he cast aside every scruple and poured every last drop of Qi into raw, unforgiving Yin Thunder. Dozens of thunderous blasts later, his reserves lay utterly exhausted, and still his opponent stood untouched. It turned out exactly as Master had warned him that morning. Victory wasn't guaranteed. Lucian admitted quietly, Lingyu Zhenren's Yinlei technique is astonishingly powerful. I spent the entire duel on the defensive. If my Qi reserves hadn't been stronger than his, I would have collapsed long before now. It was a razor-thin escape. When Zhang Lingyu finally lowered his head in defeat, Lucian couldn't hide a satisfied smile as he addressed the crowd. The onlookers, stunned into silence by Zhang Lingyu's concession, now stirred, trading excited whispers. I thought Lingyu Zhenren's attacks were all for show, one spectator said. Turns out they almost did the trick. He only ran out of chi a moment before Lucian. Seriously, I was wondering how anyone could withstand that yin lei at all. It made the match absolutely thrilling. Lingyu Genren's power is incredible, and Lucian's endurance is on another level. He literally held on until Lingyu's chi was spent. No way. Zhang Lingyu glanced up at Lucian, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. Something about Lucian's easy confidence didn't add up. He'd seemed to struggle more than he let on. "Don't look at me like that," Lucian teased, catching Zhang Lingyu's stare. "I was hanging on by a thread, just for the sake of honor." Lucian blinked, then gave Zhang Lingyu a wry smile, leaving his rival to wonder what really lay beneath that calm exterior. In reality, Zhang Lingyu's lightning assaults couldn't even graze Lucian's defenses. Only the rare, overwhelming thunder of the senior Tianxi had any effect. Everyone now understood that Lucian hadn't simply been comforting a frightened child. There was nothing amateurish about his power. And if anyone still doubted who might succeed as the next Tianxi, it certainly wouldn't be Zhang Chulan. Zhang Lingyu was far more likely to inherit that mantle. A few perceptive observers had already caught on. Feng Zhenghao, along with the transformed realm master Zhang Chulan, both recognized that Lucian's strength was anything but ordinary. The rest of the spectators, however, took his calm explanation at face value. They assumed he was merely restraining himself. After all, 17-year-old Jin Baobao was still a novice by comparison. Among the onlookers stood Wang Ai of the Wang clan, leaning on his gnarled cane. His cold gaze never left Lucian's composed figure in the center of the arena. "So the heaven-reaching talisman truly belongs to this boy," he murmured. "We should descend the mountain now. Trouble's brewing up here, and when the time comes, we'll be ready to deal with him." His words left no doubt. The Quanqing faction was preparing a major strike against Longhu Mountain. Lucian had just made himself a target. Lucian watched with detached interest as a vast contingent of Nadatong operatives massed around Mount Longhu. He had no intention of wading into this muddy conflict, nor of offering any aid to the mountain's defenders. In fact, he secretly hoped Mount Longhu would be destroyed. Without that oppressive stronghold, the alien world would lose its greatest barrier, and he'd no longer be constrained in his actions. Besides, the Chi body's true origin was already beyond recovery, so the Tongtian talisman absolutely could not be allowed to slip through his fingers. Jin Baobao had seized the talisman, and in doing so had even wounded Lucian's favorite grandson. That alone was unforgivable. "Don't worry, Patriarch," the man standing beside Wang Ai said, bowing respectfully. "A large team of highly skilled operatives has already been dispatched. If he remains isolated, he'll disappear without anyone noticing." A middle-aged man next to Wang Ai frowned. What did Feng Zhenghao say? If Jin Baobao joins the Tianxi Association under Feng Zhenghao's protection, we could face serious complications. Feng Zhenghao's voice came over the comlink, calm and measured. "Jin Yuanyuan has declined to join the Tianxi Association. I won't be intervening." Wang Ai's lips curled into a thin smile. "Excellent. In that case, there's no need to kill him outright. Cripple him permanently, destroy his meridians, lop off his hands and feet. Let him spend the rest of his life helpless and broken." At Feng Zhenghao's refusal, deep wrinkles carved themselves into Wang Ai's face, but his eyes remained as cold as ever. He knew Nadatong would look the other way so long as the victim survived. Lucian, formerly known as Jin Baobao, was no ordinary cultivator, but a rare prodigy. As long as such extraordinary individuals didn't harm common folk or upset the Great Balance, Nadatong tolerated their exploits. Besides, how could anyone prove the Wang family was behind this? Lucian had only recently come into possession of the coveted Tongtian talisman. Plenty of rival sects would have jumped at the chance to silence him. When the blood hit the fan, any of them could claim responsibility. Casting suspicion on the Wang family would be child's play. Wang Ai relished that sort of obfuscation. It was almost laughable, this so-called casual cultivator posing such a threat. But Wang Ai would ensure he never posed one again. Lucian stood on the rooftop's edge, the cold wind tugging at his coat as he listened to the grizzled veteran beside him. The man's words were blunt, but they rang with hard-earned truth. "No one remembers a corpse," the veteran said, eyes fixed on the city lights below. "And no amount of raw strength can change that. You might be able to take down one opponent, 10, even 100, but so what? Do you really think you're like your old master, invincible in every fight? In our world, this hidden world of extraordinary people, personal power only gets you so far. What matters more is what's backing you. He paused, as if searching for the right example. Remember that line from the film Ordinary People? Being the best fighter in the room won't save you unless you've also got influence. You need money and connections, real clout to play the game. This undercurrent we live in, this secret society, it's been around since time immemorial. It's not much different from the shady circles you've seen portrayed in movies, except here, the enforcers really do have superhuman strength. He reached into his pocket, fingers brushing the cold metal of a lighter. The trick is to grab onto both ends, money in one hand, people in the other. When you control finances, allies, and authority, then you can walk through fire without flinching. Until then, he swept a hand toward the dark streets below. You're just another fighter waiting to be forgotten. Lucian swallowed. He had always believed that sheer talent would carry him through any challenge. Now, for the first time, he wondered if he'd been fighting the wrong battle. Chapter 462, Fusion Technique Glitch, Update 1. 6 days into the Luotian Grand Offering, Lucian stood across from Zhang Chulan in the final match. As Lucian had predicted, Zhang Chulan, the only contender indifferent to victory, more interested in locating the old celestial master and uncovering the event's hidden truths, bowed out the moment the duel began. With his concession, Lucian claimed first place, and Zhang Chulan, in taking second, earned the right to inherit the celestial master's mantle. On the 7th morning, Master Lu Jin personally presented Lucian with the Tongqian Lu, bestowing upon him the second of the 8 wonders. By afternoon, the competition had drawn to a close, and contestants and spectators alike began their descent from the sacred peak to return home. Among them were Liu Xingyang and Huang Ming of Baiyin Temple. It's been great having you around Tianxiahui these past few days. Liu Xingyang called as he and Huang Ming approached. If you need anything in the future, just let us know. Lucian smiled and waved. Don't worry, I'll be fine. I'll contact you once I'm settled. He watched them turn away, then added casually, by the way, I've officially joined Tianxiahui. It wasn't a lie. Lucian and Tianxiahui had indeed forged a cooperative bond, one that would shape the journey ahead. With that assurance exchanged, he bid his friends farewell and prepared for whatever lay beyond the mountain's shadow. Feng Xingtong's voice crackled through the stone courtyard. Lucian, we've just learned that dozens of Wang family experts have converged at the foot of Longhu Mountain. They're almost certainly preparing to attack you. Father asked if we should dispatch some of our masters to assist. After Liu Xingyang and Huang Ming slipped away, Feng Xingtong lingered a moment before stepping forward. Lucian casually waved him off. No need. You can descend the mountain and go straight home. Don't worry about me. Once word of their defeat reaches us tomorrow, focus all your efforts on absorbing their assets. To Lucian, the Wang family was scarcely more formidable than a colony of ants. Understood, Feng Xingtong replied, concern edging his tone. He still found it hard to believe Lucian could single-handedly handle so many of the Wang family's top fighters, especially its head, Wang Ai, but his father's orders were orders. That night, Lucian drifted invisibly above his dormitory, watching the Quangxing aliens rummage through his quarters below. A slow, confident smile curled his lips. The real show is about to begin. None of you saw Lucian slip back into the dorms, and now he's vanished? Where could he have gone? Outside the building, a Quangxing alien stood clutching a torn banner, shaking his head. Yuan Tao spat onto the ground, irritation flashing in his eyes. This is ridiculous. We're supposed to be helping the master's plan, but we can't come away empty-handed. You worthless brat couldn't even keep an eye on him? Senior, another Quangxing alien offered, sounding helpless. Lucian is anything but ordinary. I saw him enter the dormitory, and in the next instant, he was gone, no trace left behind. Just then, a white-haired elder emerged from the trees behind them, followed by a handful of young disciples. Yuan Tao, his voice rang out, calm but mocking. You've lusted after the Tongtian talisman for years. Why not come to me and ask directly? Must you really resort to skulking about? The newcomer was Lu Jin of the Lu family, one of the 10 masters, accompanied by his granddaughter and several contestants loyal to the Lu clan. One of the younger followers stepped forward eagerly. "Senior Lu, it's been far too long. My father speaks of you every day. He misses you deeply." Hearing his name, Yuan Tao's face darkened with rancor. He had never forgiven Lu Jin for killing his father. "Don't push me," he growled. "I'll find him soon enough, and when I do, I'll make you regret standing in my way." Lucian hovered unseen high above Longhu Mountain, watching the battle unfold below. "Wait a moment," Lu Jin snapped into his communicator. "I'm sending a few more Quanxing troublemakers to reinforce him." With a sharp wave of his hand, fresh alien warriors poured into the fray. Instantly, skirmishes broke out across every peak and valley as the Quanxing invaders launched an all-out assault on the mountain stronghold. Despite the intensity of the fighting, Lucian remained motionless. He knew Quanxing had anticipated this clash and that the Lu family and the Nadutong sect had prepared defenses to meet every tactic. So far, the situation was under control. What truly held his attention was the power Lu Jin had just displayed, the third level of reverse birth. From the shared memories of Yuan Tao and Tianjinzhang, Lucian recognized the technique as a lost art of the long-destroyed Xuanmen Sanyi sect. According to Sanyi philosophy, one's innate qi naturally transforms into flesh and bone at birth, a process that aligns with heaven's will, but inevitably leads to decay and death. By reversing that process, condensing the physical body back into pure qi, practitioners could briefly transcend mortality. At its third level, reverse birth allowed a cultivator to dissolve into energy and reconstitute their body at will. Lucian's heart pounded as he considered the implications. If this technique could be mastered, it might overturn everything the martial world believed about life and death, and tip the scales of the ongoing war. Lucian had already witnessed how profoundly cultivation could transform the body. Not only did it dramatically boost strength and endurance, but it also mended injuries at an astonishing rate. Given the wood dragon's fierce vitality and the regenerative properties of the virus coursing through him, Lucian's healing factor was already formidable. Broken arms and shattered legs could knit themselves back together in days, even hours. Yet he hungered for more. If he could master the legendary threefold reversal of life technique, his recovery might become instantaneous. As long as his soul endured, any wound could close in minutes, and even lost limbs could sprout anew. In a world where the pinnacle of power remained disappointingly modest, where most Taoist arts delivered only middling destructive force, far outpaced by modern weaponry, many practitioners turned instead to disciplines that fortified body, mind, and spirit. Lucian had no quarrel with destructive techniques, but his true passion lay in cultivation methods that heightened vitality and sharpened awareness. The threefold reversal of life, though whispered of in hushed tones and hidden scrolls, promised an almost immortal resilience. Of course, the path to mastering it would be neither quick nor easy. Yet if anyone could unravel its secrets, it was Lucian, driven by the fierce life force granted by the wood dragon and the virus, and determined to push his potential to its absolute limit. The cultivation arts of Bayan Temple, Longhu Mountain, and the Sanyi sect have each been perfected over centuries, but inheriting their techniques doesn't mean you can mix and match their strengths at will. Every system routes qi through its own network of meridians, and those pathways often clash. If blending them were that simple, cultivators would already be harnessing all three schools' peak powers, forging their souls into solar deities, radiating golden light to harmonize body and spirit, and healing grievous wounds in an instant. It would be extraordinary, yet every would-be master has failed. Only a true immortal, one who has plumbed the very depths of Taoist doctrine, could hope to reconcile these conflicting methods into an even greater art. Lucian is far from that. His sole advantage lies in the fragmented memories he's inherited from Li Xuan, and Li Xuan himself was no prodigy, merely an avid student of Taoist lore with middling cultivation potential. Even armed with those memories, Lucian would need 10, 20 years of relentless study before he could dream of such a synthesis. Lucian could not yet fuse the various sects' martial arts into a single, perfected skill, but he had discovered a workaround. By spawning multiple bug clones, each clone could practice a different technique, and their powers would stack. In practice, Lucian's true body trained in Longushang Kung Fu. His avatar in this world mastered the White Cloud Temple style, and his Harry Potter persona learned the Trinity Kung Fu. The result? Every clone enjoyed the combined might of the Golden Light spell, the Yangsheng regimen, and reverse rebirth simultaneously. Zhang Jiwei has taken the bait, Lucian observed, and Rongshan, who was supposed to be guarding Tianjinzhong, has been lured away too. Gongqing's deception is flawless. He nodded to himself. The old master had dashed off to save Lu Jin, driven mad by the four madmen, and in doing so left Rongshan vulnerable, exactly as Gongqing intended. As acting head of the Quanqing sect, Gongqing wasn't a top-tier fighter, only marginally stronger than Zhang Lingyu and nowhere near Wang Tao's level. But while his martial prowess was modest, his intellect and theatrical talent were second to none. And that, Lucian knew, was more than enough to outplay even veteran guardians. Could you please provide the full text of the chapter you'd like me to rewrite? Right now I only have the single line. Everyone was deceived by him. Once I have the complete chapter, I'll be happy to revise it into coherent, idiomatic English and rename George to Lucian, as requested. Chapter 463, The Great Benefactor of Longnecken Update. Could that be the Shuangquan hand? Lucian's eyes snapped open when he saw Gongqing summon a youth in glasses and channel a massive azure hand of qi from his body to probe Tianjinzhong's soul. What a pleasant surprise! Tianjinzhong had first witnessed the Shuangquan hand when he met Zhang Huayi alongside Duan Muying, the eldest daughter of the medical family Jishitang, who was the first to unlock its 8 mysterious techniques. He recognized the display immediately. And the glowing blue hand before him? It was none other than Lu Liang of the Lu family wielding their heirloom soul-cleansing art. Lucian could hardly wait any longer. He spotted Lu Liang about to probe Tianjinzhong's soul and knew the moment was ripe. Darting to the door, Lucian found Gongqing crouched beside a motionless Taoist priest from Longhu Mountain, someone he'd just knocked out. Lucian seized the priest by the shoulders and hauled him upright. "Hey, Taoist from Longhu Mountain, what are you up to?" Lucian demanded. The priest blinked groggily, brushing dust from his robes. "Quiet, someone's coming," he whispered urgently. "I can't be disturbed during the soul-clearing ritual." Inside, Lu Liang's face grew tense at the commotion. Gongqing glanced at Lucian and said, "You continue searching the soul. I'll handle whoever's out here and keep the door shut." "Help!" Tianjinzhong's panicked cry echoed through the room, but Lu Liang cut him off with the opening chords of his soul-clearing technique. A pale light gathered around Lu Liang's fingers, reaching out to seize Tianjinzhong's essence. Before the ritual could fully bind, a sudden crack of thunder boomed overhead. A blinding bolt of lightning struck the building's roof with a deafening crack. "Ah!" Lu Liang shouted as the shockwave rattled his bones. His hair stood on end, and the fragile link he'd formed with Tianjinzhong's soul shattered in an instant, ending the technique. Lucian's eyes narrowed as he stepped into the clearing, voice cold and sharp. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" Tianjinzhong froze the instant he recognized Lucian, the unrivaled champion of this contest. Panic shook his features as he peered past Lucian into the gloom. "They're all Quanqing demons," he yelled. "Run! Get to Zhang Jiwei at once!" Beside him, Gongqing went pale. He, too, had heard the rumors of Lucian's power, and if Lucian truly intended to slip away and find the old master, no one here could stop him. Worse still, if Lucian reached the master's side, the secret buried in his soul would be lost forever. In a heartbeat, Gongqing seized his silver needle, energy flaring through his veins. "Since you're a Quanqing demon," he spat, voice trembling, "I'll send you straight to hell." Gongqing lunged, the razor-thin needle aimed for Lucian's heart. But Lucian barely flinched. With a casual flick of his thumb, he produced a gleaming brass coin from his sleeve and whispered, "Super electromagnetic gun." In an instant, the coin expanded, unfolded into a compact pistol crackling with blue-white energy. Lucian's calm form was a stark contrast to the chaos around him. Gongqing barely had time to register shock. He twisted aside, but Lucian's shot was faster than thought. The bullet, drawn and propelled by pure electromagnetic force, sliced through the air, carrying an almost tangible aura of annihilation. Gongqing's eyes widened as the qi radiating from the projectile pinned him in place. No matter how fast he tried to move, There was nowhere to go. One hit from this weapon, and he would be finished. Lucian had never imagined that Jin Baobao's strength would far exceed what he'd shown during the game. In an instant, the golden coin whistled through the air, struck Gongqing squarely between the eyebrows, and buried itself in his skull. A stunned hush fell over the room before someone finally gasped, "My God, he killed him in one move." Lu Liang, still reeling from his own injuries, felt his knees buckle and nearly lost control of his bladder. Gongqing wasn't a weakling. His reputation alone proved that, but even he had fallen in a single blow. What kind of power did this golden baby wield? Panic drove Lu Liang to pour every ounce of qi into his legs as he darted toward the nearest window. If he could shatter that glass, he might still escape death. He'd just taken off when a crackling bolt of lightning split the air. "Did I let you get away?" Lucian's voice was eerily calm. The lightning bolt exploded at Lu Liang's feet, pinning him to the shattered window pane. His limbs went rigid, and he collapsed in a heap, utterly helpless. As Lu Liang's vision blurred, the truth hit him. Gongqing had been on the verge of exposing Tianxi Jinzhong's secret, the hidden 8 strange techniques. To protect that secret, the old Tianxi had no choice but to silence Gongqing. And now Lu Liang was next. Lucian stood amid the aftermath of the skirmish, surveying the still silent courtyard. As acting head of Guangxing, he knew the other sects, Nadutong and the like, would have insisted on capturing Gongqing alive, dragging him back for endless questioning. To spare the venerable celestial master even more trouble, Lucian had dispensed with the usual formalities and killed Gongqing outright. The reasoning was simple. Gongqing had tried to take his life first, and no one could fault him for defending himself. As a side benefit, this settled Longhu Mountain's small grievance over their missing cultivation techniques and Taoist methods. Consider it partial recompense. Lu Liang, by contrast, had unleashed the twin fist technique in the fight. Lucian could not let such a skilled adversary slip away unexamined. With a quick movement, he clamped his hand to Lu Liang's forehead and pressed his will inward, unlocking the pathways to the younger man's memories. "Master Tian, are you all right?" Lucian asked, his other hand still gently supporting Tianjinzhong's shoulder as the old cultivator staggered back to his feet. Tianjinzhong met Lucian's gaze, relief and gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thanks to you, Mr. Xiaojin, I would have been overwhelmed by those two beasts." He glanced over at Lu Liang, who writhed under Lucian's probing touch. Lucian released his grip on Lu Liang's mind and stepped back. "I was meditating along the Tongqian path in a nearby grove when I heard the clash of blades," he explained softly. "I came as quickly as I could." Tianjinzhong nodded. "Your arrival was timely indeed. Without you, we would have paid a heavy price tonight." He steadied himself and turned to face the dim moonlight. "Let us sort through what you've learned from Lu Liang's memories. There may still be more at play here than meets the eye." Lucian gave a curt nod and refocused his attention on Lu Liang, ready to unravel the secrets hidden in the young disciple's mind, and whatever greater threat might be stalking them all. "I stepped outside to see what had happened and found a Taoist priest lying unconscious on the doorstep." Lucian forced himself to look calm and explained away his presence. After a brief conversation with Tianjinzhong, he slipped into Lu Liang's memories and pieced the story together. According to Lu Liang, Minghunshu, the soul-gathering art, is an innate supernatural talent unique to the Lu family. The stronger one's qi aptitude within the clan, the easier it is to awaken this power. Oddly, though, the Lu family showed no sign of it until after 1944, following the Jiashan Rebellion. Putting all the pieces together, Lucian saw the pattern clearly. When the 8 Wonders first emerged, rival sects seized on the pretext of wiping out the 36 thieves to hunt and slaughter the Wonders' creators. Feng Tianyang was captured by the Wang family, and to save his life, surrendered both his soul-binding technique and his general sending skill. Duan Muying must have fallen into the hands of the Lul family, giving them the so-called dual-hand abilities. For good reason, the technique had been renamed the soul-clearing technique and presented as an innate skill, so no rival sect could steal it. In truth, Lu Liang had learned only the blue hand. To complete the double hand, he would one day have to return to the Lu family for the red hand. The blue hand manipulates soul and memory. The red hand mends the body and cures every ailment. As long as a flicker of breath remains, the red hand can pull someone back from death's door. That makes it far more versatile than the Sanyi sect's 3-level reverse life triple, which only works on its user, whereas the double hand can save others as well. Uncle Tian! Brother Tian! Just then, the door burst open. Rongshan, the elder of the Tianxi sect, and Zhang Chulan rushed in. Their eyes fell first on Gong Qing's motionless body and then on Lu Liang lying unconscious. Horror froze them until they spotted Tianzhong and Lucian standing unharmed side by side. A wave of relief swept over their faces. What happened here? Rongshan barked. Xiao Yuzi, head of the Quanqing sect, tried to kill me, Zhang Chulan gasped. Fortunately, Mr. Tian and Lucian arrived just in time to drive him off. As Lucian passed by, Tian Jinzhong fell in step and hurriedly recounted the incident, carefully omitting the darkest detail, that Gong Qing had tortured him into revealing forbidden secrets. He simply said that Gong Qing had sought his life to avenge the scandal at Longhu Mountain. When Zhang Weiji heard this, he stepped forward and offered Lucian a solemn salute. "Thank you, Mr. Lucian," he said earnestly. "You have saved my life. The Longhu Mountain sect owes you an immense debt." In Zhang Weiji's eyes, Lucian had done more than rescue him from certain death. He had also safeguarded a dangerous secret that must never be exposed. Such a kindness could never be forgotten. Chapter 464, Fishing Enforcement, Update 1. Lucian offered a casual wave and a small smile. "I only happened to be passing by, Elder Taoist. You flatter me." After all he'd gained from Tianjinzhong's memories, this request was the least of his concerns. "I simply examined Father Tian's shattered limbs," he continued. "There's still a chance for regeneration. If the old Taoist priest entrusts me with this task, I can attempt to restore him." Restore Brother Tian's limbs. Zhang Shiwei's eyes gleamed with hope. One of the reasons he journeyed so far was to find a cure for his junior brother's lost arms, and every effort, even the renowned wizarding treatments in London, had failed to regenerate severed limbs. By all accounts, someone of Jin Baobao's caliber shouldn't be able to achieve it either. Was there new magic here? Or was Jin Baobao secretly gifted beyond ordinary comprehension? After all, such power at his age suggested a true prodigy, and prodigies often defy all expectations. Lucian nodded quietly. "It's a method I developed myself," he said. "In theory, it should work without any major complications." Zhang Jiwei bowed once more. "I'll put this in your hands, Mr. Lucian. If you can heal him, I, Zhang Jiwei, will consider myself forever in your debt." Lucian didn't hesitate. He placed one hand on Tianjinzhong's shoulder, channeling a surge of emerald green life energy into the old priest. At the same time, he wove intricate healing runes in the air. As magic intertwined with the life force, Tianjinzhong felt a strange tingling in his shattered limbs, as though something were knitting his bones back together. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, fingers reformed, joints realigned, fractures sealed. 10 minutes later, every break that had plagued him for decades was completely healed. With a gasp of disbelief, Tianjinzhong pushed himself up from his wheelchair and took a few cautious steps. Aside from a bit of stiffness, he was whole again. "Thank you, Mr. Lucian," he cried, bowing deeply. All these years, he had feigned paralysis to guard his secrets. He never imagined he'd stand on his own 2 feet again. Zhang Chulan, who had been standing behind the old priest, exchanged a look with Zhang Jiwei. Through Nadutong Company's inquiries, he'd already suspected Lucian's true power ran far deeper than what he'd shown in the contest. Now, after witnessing this miracle, there could be no doubt. Lucian was concealing abilities that defied every expectation. By now, it was all but confirmed. Lucian had felled the head of Quanxing with a single blow, and then miraculously restored Tianjinzhong, whose limbs had lain broken for decades. How many hidden skills did he possess? If Jin Baobao's account was accurate, the alliance they'd been discussing might yet be possible. Even so, Lucian decided to bide his time and watch from the sidelines. Before long, Shu San and Shu Si arrived, followed by Feng Baobao, Lu Jin, and the others. From their hushed conversation, Lucian learned the worst. Xiao Xiao and Shi had been gravely wounded in their clash with Quanqing's mercenaries, and Xiao Xiao's arm had been severed. Even if surgeons saved his life, he would carry that loss forever. What a clean cut. someone muttered, shaking their head. A plan already forming in his mind, Lucian offered a brief greeting to the venerable Tianxi and then made his way down the mountain to the makeshift clinic. The facility, requisitioned by Nadutong, was crowded with injured fighters. Inside, Xiao Xiao sat on a narrow cot, his face drawn and eyes hollow with despair. The doctor, expression grave, had just delivered the verdict. The arm could not be reattached. From this day forward, Xiao Xiao would walk the world as a one-armed man. Lucian sat on the edge of his bed, staring numbly at the space where his right arm had been. Since the Quanxing demon's trap had torn it away, his qi channels had collapsed. Without a functioning arm, he knew he might never again unleash the Xiao family's sacred art of qi blowing, an art he'd spent his entire life perfecting. As the last heir of his bloodline, the weight of generations pressed down on him. Failure would dishonor every one of his ancestors. He lashed out in frustration, pounding his fist against the wooden frame. Better to die than to live this way, he thought, hollow despair gnawing at his heart. A calm voice cut through the stillness. I can restore your arm if you give me your qi-blowing technique. Lucian froze. He looked up to see a stranger stepping into the lamplight, his expression unreadable. Who are you? Lucian demanded. Can you really heal me? The man's gaze never wavered. I speak only the truth, he said. Accept my terms, and by dawn your arm will be whole again. Teach me the art of qi-blowing, and I swear I will never share it with another soul. Hope flared in Lucian's chest. He closed his eyes for a long moment, picturing the life he could reclaim and the vengeance he could exact on the demon that had destroyed him. When he opened them again, his voice was calm, determined. Very well, he said. Heal me now, and the qi-blowing art is yours. A faint smile touched the stranger's lips. Lucian braced himself, ready to seal his fate, and he hoped, to restore the legacy his family had entrusted to him. Keep this up, Lucian warned, and I'll run out of breath too. Xiao Xiao hesitated for a moment, then realized Lucian wasn't bluffing and gave a reluctant nod. Without wasting another second, Lucian placed a steady hand on Xiao Xiao's shoulder. Drawing on his healing qi and tapping into the memory pattern stored in his mind, he mended the broken arm with precision and speed. The following morning, Lucian politely declined both the old Taoist priests and the Lu family's offers of an escort to the airport. Clutching the Tongtian talisman in one hand, he descended the mountain path with quiet dignity. At the foot of the slope, he didn't hail a taxi. Instead, he strolled into the nearby electric vehicle shop and bought himself a compact electric donkey. Preferring open trails to crowded roads, he set off toward the airport, the talisman tucked safely in the front basket. Humming a light-hearted tune, Lucian kept his little bike at a steady 35 kilometers per hour. A grin spread across his face as he thought, my trusty ride, no traffic jams, no delays. Then he leaned into the breeze and sped off toward his next destination. I don't believe you can resist this temptation. Lucian knew the Wang family would make their move on the way to the airport, but they weren't the only ones eyeing the Tongtian talisman. Dozens of other sects and clans lurked in the shadows, waiting for a chance to strike. That was exactly what he wanted. By flaunting the talisman in plain sight, he hoped to bait the hesitant into attacking so he could turn the tables. Instead of haggling with each group, he'd simply copy their memories and appropriate their Taoist techniques. He told himself he wasn't a common thief. He had principles, even if they bent to suit his purposes. Stealing without provocation felt wrong, but if someone came after him first, the ethics were on his side. It was, as he liked to think, fishing enforcement. And if any of the major sects managed to resist temptation, there'd still be time afterward to negotiate a fair trade for the talisman. Is he insane? Murmured the onlookers, various sect leaders and clan heirs, watching in stunned silence as Lucian nonchalantly placed the Tongtian talisman into the basket of his battery-powered cart. Their jaws hung open. Never had they seen such brazen confidence or such an invitation to disaster. Yet beneath their shock, curiosity flickered. Who was this man who dared challenge them so openly? And what would happen when they finally took the bait? Lucian's daring move caught them completely off guard. If he'd simply hailed a taxi to the airport and flown straight back to Beijing, there'd be nothing they could do. Any interference with a civilian would draw Nadutong's wrath. Over the past weeks, every driver under Longhu Mountain's emplo he had quietly been replaced by Nadutong's own agents. Yet here was Lucian, skillfully slipping through their net and clearly looking for a direct confrontation. It was one thing for the Ten Lords, those power brokers in their own right, to dare such boldness. But Lucian, a young golden boy with no official standing, his audacity sent a ripple of alarm through them. Still, they weren't about to underestimate him. To guard against any hidden traps, they methodically swept the area, watching for agents from Longhu Mountain, the Lu family, or Nadutong itself. Only when every corner was secure would they make their next move. Xiaoshu, are we actually just going to stay out of this? The head of the East China Division, a middle-aged man whose remaining tufts of hair fluttered feebly in the breeze, glared at the surveillance monitor. On the screen, Jin Baobao stood cornered by rival sects, powerful clans, and rogue practitioners. Normally, the Bureau never meddled in otherworldly disputes so long as they posed no threat to overall stability. A simple raid on his Tongtian Lu tract would be no concern. But if neither side backed down, the standoff could erupt into all-out war. Even if ordinary civilians escaped harm, the death toll among cultivators would spark endless vendettas, clan against clan, master against disciple, until the entire alien realm was plunged into chaos. As director, he would be held responsible for any breach of peace in his jurisdiction, protocol or no. Standing beside him, Xiaoshu, a younger officer in a sage green robe, quietly offered a cigarette. "Relax, sir," he said with a calm smile. "Trust me, Jin Baobao isn't as helpless as he appears. He can handle whoever's ganged up on him." Jin Baobao leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Almost no one can defeat him. What worries us most is the Wang family's involvement. I've already notified the old Taoist priest. If things spin out of control, he'll step in to mediate." His voice was calm, betraying nothing of his true identity. No one knew where he really came from, and he intended to keep it that way. "With the Taoist priest on our side, we shouldn't face any major obstacles," Lucian said. "Capturing so many Quanxing cult members, and even detaining their acting leader, is no small feat. You've certainly earned your credit." Jin Baobao waved a hand dismissively. "Don't flatter me. We did take losses, and we still haven't uncovered the cult's true purpose. Honestly, I'm just hoping we avoid punishment." Lucian nodded. "I understand. Though we've dealt a heavy blow, the root of Quanxing's scheme remains hidden." Jin Baobao's eyes glittered. "On another note, I just got word from head office. All regional chiefs from the 6 major territories are summoned to a high-level meeting." Lucian frowned. 6 territories? Weren't there 7? "Old Liao in South China is dead," Jin Baobao explained. "My informants say one of his temporary agents killed him. Apparently, they'll use the summit to reform the entire temp worker system. You'd better pay close attention." He paused and glanced at the bank of monitors lining the wall. The screens showed nothing but empty corridors and flickering lights. Satisfied there was no immediate threat, he relaxed, just as one of the guards who'd been hovering nearby suddenly lunged at Lucian. Shocked by the unexpected attack, Lucian barely had time to react. Lucian barely had time to register the newcomer before a young man in a cap and mask burst from the earth at his feet. He didn't swing a blade. He simply reached for the Tongtian talisman perched in Lucian's basket. It was obvious. They all wanted the talisman, not Lucian himself. If they could claim it without a fight, they would. But Lucian wasn't about to give it up quietly. With a flick of his wrist, he unleashed an electric whip that lashed out, coiling around the masked youth in midair. The young man let out a strangled cry as Lucian yanked him back into his grip. No sooner had Lucian subdued that one attacker than dozens more burst from concealment in every direction. Lucian braced himself for the onslaught, and braced against things he'd only half believed existed. First came spectral horses formed from sliced grass, galloping in to trample him. Then, a shower of enchanted beans sprouted clay warriors that swarmed like ants. All around him, paper effigies writhed to life, and sinister shapes wreathed in purple-black energy traced arcane symbols in the air. Birds screeched as winged spirits took flight on invisible currents. Zombies clawed their way through the dirt. Talisman papers snapped and fluttered like deadly wind blades. Even Shaolin's legendary Great Compassion Palm, an art Lucian had assumed belonged only in temple legends, was hurled at him in a blinding flash of golden light. Lucian danced back, absorbing 2 of the palm strikes with the electric whip and parrying the rest with narrow grins of disbelief. He'd thought these were just fringe sects with a few tricks up their sleeves. Clearly, he'd underestimated them, and now they'd thrown every trick they had at him. He tightened his grip on the basket and prepared to strike back. If they wanted the Tongtian talisman, they'd have to pry it from his cold, dead hands. And given the level of their magic, he knew this battle was only just beginning. Lucian watched the encircling shapes with cool amusement. Even if none of the great sects had sent agents to seize his Tongtian talisman directly, there was no reason to believe that no one among them, rogue disciples or secret adepts, would show up. Across the alien worlds, countless disillusioned followers of those same sects had abandoned their orders. Some had even slipped away with forbidden Taoist techniques, only to join Quanxing, the organization that prized the 8 wonders above all. No doubt a few Quanxing operatives who'd escaped the rout at Longhu Mountain were here tonight. He allowed himself a slow smile. This was exactly what he wanted. More enemies meant more opportunities to harvest their unique Taoist skills, and it was far easier than negotiating a trade with the major sects. Why haggle when he could simply claim each fallen foe's art as his own? Lightning crackled in the air. In an instant, Lucian blurred into motion, leaving only a faint afterimage behind. Then, blade and talisman in hand, he struck, one adversary after another, confident that every victory would bring him closer to mastering the legendary arts he sought. Lucian surveyed the circle of aliens pressing in on him. Though they outnumbered him, most were run-of-the-mill fighters. Only a handful even approached Zhang Lingyu's caliber. That made sense. Anyone who'd survived the later stages of the Grand Luo Heavenly Ceremony would be each clan's cream of the crop and top-tier powerhouses in their own right. A single jolt from Lucian's electric stun car was almost always enough. By the time he'd completed his circuit, every would-be assailant lay sprawled and unconscious along the roadside. He moved down the line, tapping into each alien's memories in turn, extracting the precise skills and Taoist techniques he sought. Then he hopped back onto his little electric stove. He saw no need to kill them outright. After all, they'd come for his Tongtian talisman, and he'd simply claimed their abilities in return. The score was settled, and no further blood needed to be shed. Besides, after today's demonstration, none of them would dare challenge him again. Done so quickly. No wonder he took first place. His strength is unbelievable, whispered the old man, watching in stunned silence as Lucian methodically knocked out the last stragglers and tossed them aside. Even his temp, Xiao Zizai, would stand little chance against so many alien fighters from different sects and clans. Lucian was astonishingly powerful for someone so young. It all hinges on whether the Wang family can make him go all out, Shusan muttered, flicking ash from his cigarette. Lucian had already slain the leader of the Quanxing sect with a single blow. He was virtually the equivalent of 10 men. Ordinary alien combatants posed no real challenge. What Shusan wanted now was to see the Wang family push Lucian to his absolute limits, to force him into exposing whatever hidden flaw might reveal his true nature. After poring over the intelligence, he and Shu Si had begun to wonder if the golden-haired youth who'd emerged from the Goblet of Fire was somehow possessed by Voldemort. Only a Western Dark Lord like Voldemort could rival the legendary Ten Guys in sheer strength. That suspicion explained why Lucian, a 17-year-old 6th-year wizard, could perform such superhuman feats. It was just a theory, of course. Voldemort had never demonstrated any innate thunder and lightning magic in his lifetime. But it was the only explanation that made sense. At this stage, the Golden Child's power doesn't come from dark magic, but from his innate mastery of thunder and lightning. Everything now hinges on the outcome of the final test. If he loses control and is forced to unleash black curses, whether it's the Killing Curse, the Fire Curse, or even the Cruciatus Curse, there's a very real chance Voldemort will be unable to escape. If he truly is the Dark Lord reborn, every precaution must be taken. Golden Child is about to reach the Wang family's containment perimeter, Shusan said, his eyes glued to the monitor where Lucian hovered just outside the barrier. All external response teams, stand by. Zhang Chulan, notify the Celestial Master immediately. He's needed here at once. The moment Shu San saw Lucian edging closer to the Wang family's defenses, he transmitted his orders without hesitation and prepared to mobilize his forces. Chapter 466. Stop Pretending. Show Your Hand. Part 3. Lucian clicked off his stun baton and swept his gaze over the growing crowd. In front stood Wang Ai on crutches. Behind him sat Wang Bing, curled into himself in a wheelchair. Lucian's lips curved into a mocking smile. Well, well, if it isn't the cowardly grandfather and grandson act, no masks either. Are you trying to silence me before you die? He took a step forward, voice low and taunting. Jin, you've got the gall to swagger around with your life hanging by a thread? You dared to harm me, and now you're going to pay double for that courtesy. At his words, Wang Bing's whole body shook with anger. His skin bubbled in angry sores from the earlier shocks, wounds that even the best medicines wouldn't heal for months. But Wang Ai remained eerily calm, as though angering someone already on death's door held no interest. In truth, Wang Ai said, voice as cold as steel, I was going to chop off your limbs and cut out your tongue, leave you a helpless cripple. But with all these witnesses circling us, you might as well die today. Then I can blame every last one of them. A hush fell over the onlookers as Lucian met Wang Ai's gaze. No more hiding. Now both sides were showing their true colors. It's a nice thought, but you clearly don't understand modern technology, Lucian said with a small shake of his head as he looked skyward. He'd already spotted the drone hovering high above, tracking his every move. In other words, Nadu Tong's reach was absolute. Every action the Wang family took was under its watchful eye. Even though aliens had become part of everyday life, powerful families like the Wangs still underestimated the sheer force of cutting-edge surveillance. Technological progress had gained speed in recent years, and as the government's agency for managing extraterrestrials, Nadu Tong enjoyed access to the nation's most advanced innovations. The aliens might lag in other respects, but when it came to technology, they were undeniably in a class of their own. I won't hold back any longer, Lucian declared, stepping off the tiny electric stove as he leveled a single finger at Wang Ai and the assembled Wang family mercenaries. A cool smile played on his lips. In my eyes, you're all nothing but trash. Slaughtering you will be no more difficult than crushing a nest of ants. Grandpa, is he out of his mind? Wang Bing wailed, tears welling in his eyes. Wang Ai dismissed his grandson's fear with a wave of his hand. Once you recover the Tongqian Lu, kill him and clean up the mess. This operation had drawn in nearly the entire Wang clan, dozens of hired swords, battle-hardened mercenaries, even the promise of the fearsome golden baby and the venerable old Tianxi. Against such overwhelming numbers, any ordinary enemy would have broken instantly. Lucian, however, was no ordinary foe. The mercenaries surged forward in a tidal wave of steel and malice. Lucian sprang upward, soaring above them as if weightless. From his throat came a voice that shook the sky itself. Dragon-slaying magic, roar of the fire dragon. In an instant, a roaring cascade of tricolored flames descended like a meteor shower, enveloping Wang Ai and every soldier around him. The heat was suffocating, the light blinding. This was a power far beyond what he had unleashed in his previous clash with the Celestial Masters. As the firestorm raged on, Lucian hovered above the chaos, resolve burning in his eyes. The game had only just begun. When the last flickers of flame died away, every stranger from the Wang family had been reduced to ash, and the asphalt road beneath them had collapsed into a yawning, bottomless chasm. Lucian gave a final wave to the hovering drone overhead. Game's over. Time to head home. With a faint pop, he vanished, and in the next instant found himself back in his Beijing apartment. 2 kilometers from the battlefield, inside a camouflaged military truck, Shu San stared at the monitor showing Lucian's disappearance and the vast crater left behind. His half-smoked cigar had dropped from trembling fingers onto the floor. Beside him, Lao Do and Zhang Chulan stared at the screen, their eyes wide with shock. The old heavenly master, who had come along in hopes of mediating the dispute, murmured to himself, "So that's who it was. No wonder." Shu San had invited the heavenly master to intervene between Jin Baobao and the Wang family. Ordinarily, the old man steered clear of such conflicts, but Jin Baobao had shown kindness to the people of Longhu Mountain, and that, the Heavenly Master could not ignore. Originally, Zhang Chulan's plan was simple. The moment Lucian reached his limit, he would rush to his aid and convene the 10 underworld elders to publicly expose the Wang family's atrocities. In doing so, even if the Golden Child later claimed the Heavenly Basket, he would never again suffer disgrace, a fitting way to repay old debts. But nobody expected events to end like this. With a single, devastating technique, Lucian had slaughtered every last member of the Wang clan. That move, it felt all too familiar. It was the very same spell the Taoist master had used to defeat Zhang Chulan that fateful night. In that instant, the truth hit him. The Golden Child was, in fact, the Taoist master in disguise. No wonder he had never shown the slightest hesitation. The Wang family had finally met their match. "Master," Zhang Chulan whispered to the aged Heavenly Master, "do you know Lucian's true identity?" The Heavenly Master shook his head slowly. "I do not," he admitted. "A few nights ago, he appeared before me as an elderly Taoist, claiming only to seek an exchange of ideas." "An exchange of ideas?" Zhang Chulan echoed, his eyes widening in disbelief, and the others leaned forward, silently awaiting the rest of the story. The Master of Laotian stood at the pinnacle of the alien world, an undisputed powerhouse no one dared challenge. Yet the force Lucian had just unleashed, leveling the entire Wang clan with a single strike, was beyond terrifying. Which of them, then, could claim victory? Broken silence fell as the Laotian master spoke for the first time since the clash. "I've disappointed you all. I've lost, utterly. It's the first time in my life I've tasted defeat, and strangely it feels refreshing." Old Heavenly Master Tian stroked his long white beard, his tone suddenly serious. "Let the matter drop. Do not trouble him any further. The Wang family brought this on themselves. Frankly, I still cannot fathom how strong he truly is." Shu San and Shu Si swallowed hard. If even their venerable master admitted ignorance of Lucian's real power, then what they'd just seen must only be the beginning. A nearby disciple whispered, "The next head office meeting will be explosive. The temporary worker scandal won't hold a candle to this. I wonder how the executives up there will react." At the very back, Old Du, the East China Regional Director, pressed a trembling handkerchief to his sweaty brow, already dreading the repercussions. The company will undoubtedly be unsettled by Lucian's sudden appearance in the alien world. "From everything I've seen, he acts with sound judgment. There's nothing reckless about him," the Heavenly Master said. "This time it was the Wang family who overreacted out of fear. I sincerely hope the company shows the same caution." Heavenly Master fell silent for a moment, then added, "Lucian has proven himself a friend to Dragon Tiger Mountain, and the company's mission is to preserve harmony between the alien realm and ordinary people. We can't let those two collide." Shusan relaxed his shoulders and allowed himself a wry smile. "Master, you're overstating it. If a stranger of his caliber turned up in our territory, old Zhao and the others would be laughing themselves silly. Unless he commits something truly outrageous, the company won't have the time or the inclination to lock him up." And he was right. With Lucian's strength and even temperament, the company's more likely response would be to win him over rather than punish him. Alien factions are flexing their muscles overseas, and so long as Lucian doesn't massacre civilians here, he'll be seen not as a threat, but as a strategic asset. Chapter 467, Mastering the Fairy Ball. Update 1. While Lucian's newest clone was charting a freshly discovered world, his other selves were hard at work in their own realms. In the hidden underground chamber beneath the Fairy Tale Guild, Lucian stood before a suspended orb of shimmering time magic. Inside its sphere, time flowed normally, but beyond its boundaries, everything was frozen. A triumphant smile spread across his face. "Finally," he whispered, voice brimming with excitement. Lucian had devoted himself to unraveling the mysteries of time across multiple dimensions. He'd spent countless nights dissecting the structure of the fairy ball, poring over its runes, and even staked out the area around Tianlong Island to observe the spell in action. After exhaustive study and experimentation, he had done it. He'd summoned the legendary fairy ball entirely through his own efforts. From this day forward, unless an opponent could match his command of temporal law, or wield power potent enough to shatter time itself, Lucian need fear no attack. With this barrier, he could forcibly bend the flow of time around him, creating a defense that would, in comic book terms, rank at least at the universe level. And now that he'd mastered it, there was no going back. Lucian pushed open the hidden chamber's door and stepped out onto the guild roof, the morning sun illuminating the courtyard's festive banners and floral garlands. He glanced at the cheerful scene below, then caught Wakaba's sleeve. "Wakaba, why is everyone celebrating today?" He hadn't told the guild about the rescue mission for Natsu and the others, so why the decorations and laughter? Wakaba beamed. "Master Lucian, you're just in time. A few days ago, Biska proposed to Alzak, and today they're getting married. Macau tried to let you know, but your barrier spell redirected him." Lucian's whiskered chin twitched as he stroked his beard with a clawed hand. "I see. We've got a wedding on deck, 2 reasons to celebrate in one day." He hadn't expected such happy occasions to collide, or that Biska would beat Alzak to the proposal. Lucian recalled Alzak's ill-fated plan to propose during the Grand Magic Directors Tournament. He'd choked under pressure and couldn't follow through, until Biska, seeing his embarrassment, took the initiative. Wakaba cocked her head. "Double celebration? What are you getting at, Master?" Lucian's lips curved into a knowing smile. "Patience. You'll find out soon enough." "Do you know when the wedding begins?" Lucian asked, glancing at his watch. "In about half an hour," Wakaba replied. Lucian nodded. "That gives me enough time. I have something urgent to handle, but don't worry, I'll be back well before the ceremony starts." Before Wakaba could ask another question, Lucian tapped his wand and disapparated. In the blink of an eye, he reappeared high above the open sea where Tianlang Island had vanished beneath the waves. He hovered, studying a pale, wavering sphere of light floating just below him. "As I suspected," he murmured, "the activation is stuck. There simply isn't enough magical energy." Lucian swept around the glowing orb, confirming his theory. The fairy sphere was technically released, but without sufficient power from its original caster, it crept forward at a snail's pace. At this rate, he calculated, it would take nearly 6 years to fully stabilize on its own. "Not on my watch," he said. With a decisive step, Lucian thrust his right hand into the heart of the sphere. Instantly, his intimate knowledge of fairy magic allowed him to weave his own aura into its core. He channeled a torrent of energy, his reserves replenishing almost as quickly as he spent them, until the orb pulsed brilliantly. The bottleneck dissolved, and the sphere's shimmering contours radiated clear, sustained power. Satisfied, Lucian withdrew his hand. The fairy sphere now glowed steadily, free of any sluggish limbo. With his task complete, he prepared to return to the wedding, just in time for the first vows. Lucian stood at the edge of the clearing, high, his hand crackling with residual arcane power. "Even if we expand this fairy sphere to blanket the entire island, we'll have the time we need," he told himself. 20 minutes later, the massive shimmering barrier that had cocooned Tianlang Island began to wane. The island, once lost within the fractures of time, reappeared in the mortal realm as the final threads of magic dissolved. "Good," Lucian breathed, releasing a wave of spiritual energy to scan the terrain below. Everyone's still alive. His power washed over the island, pinpointing the fallen. Natsu and the others lay unconscious, their injuries severe but not fatal. Relief flooded through Lucian. They had just survived a confrontation with Akunokia, the world-shattering black dragon. He knew, even now, that defeating such a beast was far from guaranteed. Akunokia's ability to convert any assault into pure magical force made it nearly invincible. Only colossal spells, blessing brute strength or manipulating metal through sheer will, had any effect on its obsidian scales. What was more, the dragon could unleash devastating magic on its own. Time was running out. Lucian's newly formed clone was already en route to seize the chi-body source flow, the hidden wellspring of power he so desperately needed. With its energy, he might stand a chance against Akunokia, and so, without another moment's hesitation, Lucian turned away from the clearing and set his plan into motion. Lucian focused inward, channeling his energy through the chi-body source flow rather than relying on the divine spirit alone. He suspected it would better stabilize the spell, returning all residual power to its purest form. With a soft hum of power, his form blurred, and in an instant he reappeared at the heart of Tianlang Island. First, he summoned every fallen comrade with a pulse of gentle healing magic. One by one, eyes fluttered open as consciousness returned. Makarov and his team lifted their heads, blinking in confusion. "Everyone, you're back," Lucian called, stretching his fingers into playful cat claws and offering a warm grin. Makarov shook himself free of lingering disorientation. "Lucian? What happened? Did the Black Dragon attack again, and where did it go?" Around them, the others exchanged bewildered looks. Their final collective memory had been of joining hands, bracing for the Black Dragon's thunderous roar, and then oblivion. Now the dragon was gone, and Lucian stood before them, alive and well. "You were ambushed by the Black Dragon over a year ago," Lucian explained, his tone steady. "As for why you're here with me now, you'll need to ask our first-generation guild leader." At his words, all eyes swung toward the ridge above. Bathed in moonlight, a tiny figure stood poised like a forest sprite. Her silvery hair framed an ageless, elfin face, an unexpected contrast to the grave situation. She gave a quiet nod, her large eyes never leaving the group below. Lucian turned back to his friends. "She'll fill you in on everything. Rest for now. You've all earned it." He offered a reassuring smile as the guild members settled back onto the grass, their questions waiting, just momentarily, until the mysterious little leader would answer. Lucian stared in disbelief. The tiny girl floating before him wasn't made of flesh and bone, but of pure spirit, and she looked exactly like the preserved body entombed in the guild's secret basement. As the last shards of the fairy orb's seal shattered at his touch, Makarov, the current guildmaster, collapsed unconscious at Lucian's feet. He clearly hadn't been the one to release its power. Already, Lucian's suspicions were confirmed. A clear, melodious voice broke the stunned silence. "Greetings, everyone. I am Mavis Vermilion, the first guildmaster." Mavis's ethereal form drifted forward, her hand raised in a gentle wave. The assembled wizards, the entire guild council, stood frozen. Even Makarov, who'd studied the century-old corpse but never spoken with its owner, lay pale and still. "I gathered each member's faith and magic long ago and channeled it into this fairy orb," Mavis continued, her voice both proud and rueful. "With that power, I invoked the 3 fairy blessings. But in doing so, I inadvertently sealed all of you within the orb's confines. As a spirit, I would have needed 7 years to amass the magic required to lift that seal. Thankfully, this young wizard," she smiled, turning her gaze on Lucian, "mastered the orb's magic far sooner than I anticipated. By pouring his own power into it, he shattered the seal a full year ahead of schedule." The fragments of the orb at Lucian's feet glowed once, then dissolved into motes of light. Lucian's heart thundered in his chest, not from pride alone, but from the weight of what he had set in motion. Mavis let her words hang in the air for a moment before she began to explain the deeper history. How the fairy blessings had forged the guild's reputation, why her spirit lingered, and what obligations now fell upon Lucian and his comrades. Each revelation wove the guild's storied past directly into the challenges awaiting them in the days to come. As Mavis spoke, Lucian understood that this reunion with the guild's founding master herself was not merely a triumph of magic. It was the opening of an entirely new chapter in their shared destiny. Lucian dipped his head respectfully toward the ghostly figure before him. "First President, it's an honor. I am Lucian, your 6th-generation successor." Beneath his calm greeting, Lucian couldn't help but marvel at the raw power emanating from the ancient spirit. Even after centuries since his passing, the first president could still channel enough mana to weave a massive fairy sphere, one broad enough to shelter the entire guild in a single stroke. Lucian himself could barely muster a sphere that would protect more than 2 or 3 people at once. Yet here they stood. 6 generations on, and the guild had grown into something far greater than he'd ever imagined. Mavis watched him closely, her mind drifting back to a single moment from a year ago. Lucian had awakened her from a long sleep, and she'd opened her eyes to find every guild member working together in perfect harmony. A bittersweet smile had touched her lips then, but as the memory faded, so did the warmth it carried. Chapter 468, Fairy Tale's Main Force Returns, Second Update. Makarov dusted himself off and rose to his feet, brow furrowed. "Lucian," he asked, "you've insisted more than once that you're our 6th-generation president, But I'm the third generation president, so you ought to be the fourth. How did you arrive at 6? Lucian grinned and stepped forward. It all comes down to the true lineage of our grand demon martial arts. Initially, I was recognized as the 4th generation master. When I passed the title on, it went to Macau. He became the 5th. The moment Macau handed it back to me, I technically became the 6th. That's why I claim the 6th generation. Makarov's eyes nearly popped out. And during all that, I missed the single biggest tournament in recent memory? How could this have slipped by me? I'm so furious. I can't believe I wasn't there. At the edge of the hall, Natsu Plum heard the commotion and clenched his fists. Word had spread that every major guild across Fior had sent champions to the Grand Demon War. Countless masters had dueled in spectacular fashion, but Fairy Tail's hot-blooded dragon slayer hadn't been chosen to represent the guild. Stuck on the sidelines, Natsu could barely contain the fire rising in his chest. Lucian gave a confident smile. Natsu, don't worry, the Grand Demon Martial Arts Tournament only happens once a year. We'll have another shot next year. Nah, Lucian, Natsu shot back, grinning. The reason we made it back from that 7-year seal was all you. At that, Makarov's eyes glistened. He glanced around the guild hall on Tenru Island and swallowed hard. The thought of being stuck underground for 7 years without Lucian, it was almost unbearable. Urza stepped forward next, arms outstretched as if to crush him in a grateful embrace. But Lucian, no longer the innocent boy she remembered, sidestepped gently. He might be strong enough to shrug off Armor's blow, but he wasn't quite ready for that kind of hug. Mirajane, on the other hand, didn't hesitate. She swept him into a warm, relieved squeeze. Lucian laughed softly and eased free. Mirajane checked her pocket watch. By the way, it's almost time. We really can't delay any longer, or we'll miss Alzak and Biska's wedding. With that, Lucian flicked his tail in the guild's signal. Across the hall, voices rose in surprised chorus. What? Alzak and Biska's wedding? In the next heartbeat, a shimmer of light engulfed them all, and the members of Fairy Tail vanished from Tenru Island, off to celebrate love reunited at last. When everyone else vanished, Lucian, the 1st generation guildmaster, reappeared before him and muttered, I've had enough of Tenru Island. Why not get married instead? And with that, he too disappeared from the island. In Magnolia City, the old Chaldea Cathedral, once the battleground of Laxus's Fairy Tail civil war, had been lavishly transformed into a wedding hall. High above the nave, Marcus, ever keen to play the host, was decked out in priestly robes, ready to officiate. On the altar steps, Alzak and Biska beamed at one another in their wedding finery. Below them, Fairy Tail's wizards had gathered to celebrate. Familiar faces like Macau, Laki, and the rest of the old guard stood alongside newer members, Minerva, Sting, and Rogue, freshly aligned with the great magic queen Urza. Macau leaned in toward Wakaba, scanning the crowd anxiously. Where's the guildmaster? He asked. He promised he'd be here before the ceremony. Wakaba sighed. He said the same yesterday, but he never showed up. I'm starting to wonder if something urgent kept him in seclusion. Seclusion? Macau frowned. Why does he insist on holed up somewhere, studying that so-called fairy ball? Would you trust anyone who misses your wedding because they're busy meditating in a cave? Wakaba offered a small apologetic shrug. It's who he is. Let's hope he arrives before the vows. Behind them, the chatter swelled. Guests whispered about Lucian's sudden disappearance, about prophecies linked to Tenro Island, and about whether their missing guildmaster would make it back in time to give his blessing. Yet for now, all eyes remained fixed on the radiant couple above, Alzak and Biska, about to join their lives and their destinies forever. Why are you thinking of leaving at a moment like this? Haven't you thought it through? Minerva lounged beside them in her silk keongsam, a lacquered fan hiding half her face as she teased. What's on your mind? Macau and Wakaba exchanged startled glances, then excitement lit their features. Before anyone could answer, the grand doors to the hall burst open with a crash. A shout rang out, warm and familiar. Ha! Alzak! Biska! How could you have a wedding without us? Natsu's voice boomed across the nave, and a second later he strode in, grinning broadly. From behind him came the cheerful din of other returning wizards, members of Fairy Tail who'd once been the guild's heart and soul. We're back, they called in unison. Tears sprang to Alzac's and Biska's eyes, and even the older fairy tale veterans who'd stayed behind were overcome. Nearby, the newer recruits watched in awe. These were the heroes who, just a year ago, had earned fame throughout the continent. After a few more embraces and jubilant shouts, the ceremony resumed. "Exchange rings," the officiant announced. "The president's speech," chimed another. Then came the moment every guest had waited for. "Now, the groom may kiss the bride." With that, the entire church seemed to hold its breath, and at last, the seals of Lucian and Biska's vows were complete. A ripple of cheers rolled through the pews, and someone couldn't resist calling out, "Kiss! Kiss!" Laughter and applause filled the air. All at once, the wedding hall had reached its happiest, most unforgettable peak, and among the crowd, an unexpected figure watched with a knowing smile. "Kiss!" Shodai leapt onto a chair in the front row, pumping his fists in the air as the crowd erupted around him. Makarov, standing beside him, gaped in astonishment, a tankard of ale trembling in his hand. Not far away, Lucian, ever composed, watched the spectacle with a slow, satisfied smile. He licked the tips of his gloves, already plotting. To him, Mavis's return was an opportunity, not a miracle. As Fairy Tale's first master and the inventor of its third-generation lost magic, Mavis held knowledge that could skyrocket his own strength. A single conversation with her might unlock powers beyond his current reach. With the coronation concluded, the guild hall transformed into a raucous carnival. Tables groaned under plates of roasted meat, mugs clinked with honeyed cider, and laughter filled every corner. Old friends caught up on the year's adventures. New recruits nervously traded introductions. As the firelight danced across worn wooden beams, even Makarov's bewilderment softened into a broad grin. By late evening, the revelry tapered off. Lanterns burned low, and a hush settled over the hall. Lucian rose and called the senior members, Shodai, Makarov, the first-generation mages who relished an excuse to meddle, all gathered in the guild's private council room. "Thanks to President Mavis's protective barrier, we survived the Black Dragon's assault," Lucian began, his tone brisk. "But that shield was only temporary. We can't rely on it forever." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "The creature we faced is called Akolokia. I've pieced together every scrap of information I could find. About him, the Eclipse Gate, even the war Natsu and his allies fought over 400 years ago." Murmurs rippled through the group as Lucian laid out the grim history, how Akolokia once terrorized entire kingdoms, how the Eclipse Gate's dark energies granted him near immortality, and how Natsu Dragnil's band of dragon slayers drove him back, at great cost. Now, with the gate's power reawakening, Akolokia had returned. Silence fell. Outside, the last embers in the hearth crackled. Within those stone walls, the heart of Fairy Tale beat steady, but everyone sensed the stow, Aram gathering on the horizon. "Tomorrow," Lucian concluded, "we prepare. This time, we fight not just to survive, but to end Akolokia's threat once and for all." The guild's heroes exchanged determined nods. The true battle was only just beginning. Lucian stood at the center of the chamber, his voice calm but resolute. Around him, the assembled mages, members of Fairy Tale and their allies, fell silent. Dragon slayers, guild masters, and even representatives of the dragon race leaned forward, sensing the gravity of what he was about to say. "So," Lucian began, "if we don't find a way to destroy the Black Dragon, our world is destined to be devoured by its darkness." He let that hang in the air a moment. "Now that I've mastered the fairy ball, my next goal is clear. We must defeat the Black Dragon, and in doing so, discover whatever powerful magics lie buried alongside it." He swept a hand across the room. "This battle won't be easy. That's why I'm telling all of you. We should open the Eclipse Gate, summon Natsu and Gajil's dragons, and call on every ally we can, magical or otherwise. I refuse to face this alone, and frankly, it's the perfect opportunity to reach out to the first-generation dragons and learn secrets we've never even dreamed of." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Guildmasters traded astonished glances. Dragon slayers shifted uneasily, but curiosity sparkled in their eyes. Lucian turned his attention to Natsu, whose usual fiery confidence was gone, replaced by wide-eyed shock. "Natsu," Lucian said softly, "everything I told you earlier was true. Igneel has been residing inside me all this time." Natsu staggered back as if struck. For years he'd scoured the world for his adoptive father, the mighty dragon Igneel. To learn that his father had been within Lucian's body all this time felt impossible. "You're saying Igneal was inside you?" Natsu's voice was barely a whisper. "Exactly," Lucian replied. He nodded at Gajiel and Wendy. "And it's not just Igneal. Gajiel, Wendy, both of you carry the dragons who taught you your magic within yourselves as well." Gajiel's stoic mask cracked. Wendy pressed a trembling hand to her chest. The hall fell into stunned silence, every face reflecting the weight of this revelation. Lucian took a steadying breath. "I know this is a lot to take in, but now that we know where these dragons are, and that they've been guiding us all along, we have a fighting chance. Together, we can open the Eclipse Gate, call forth their full power, and finally put an end to the Black Dragon's threat." A hush followed him as the mages, dragon slayers, and dragon representatives absorbed his words. Somewhere in that silence lay hope and the promise of an alliance that could save their world. Lucian frowned. "They've been holding back, helping you keep your power in check so you won't fully transform into a dragon and so the Black Dragon can't track them down." He met his friend's gaze. "But if you really want to see them, I know a way." Though Lucian had already sifted through Sting's and Roger's memories, the fragments only raised more questions. To uncover exactly what happened 400 years ago, he still had to track down Anna, the one who sent Natsu and the others back in time, and locate the 3 dragons sealed within their human hosts. Chapter 469, The Strongest Demon Natsu, Update 1. "Really?" Lucian's eyes glittered with anticipation. At his words, Naz and the other 2 dragons leaned forward, their excitement obvious. "Absolutely," Naz replied, offering his hand. "Link hands with us, grasp my paw, and I'll pull you, and the dragon spirit sleeping within you, into my spirit realm. There, you'll be able to communicate freely, provided none of us resists." Lucian flexed his cat-like paw. Naz and the other dragons each reached out, their claws lightly brushing his. They clasped hands in a tight circle, ready for the ritual. "Psychic power, activate!" With that command, Lucian unleashed 3 streams of spiritual energy. He threaded one strand into each dragon rider, entwining their own spirits and the latent dragon souls nestled within into the swirling gateway of his temporary spirit world. Not a single mind resisted. In an instant, both riders and dragons slipped through the veil, emerging unharmed into Lucian's ethereal domain, where true communion could begin. Chapter 10, Reunion in the Spirit Realm. Lucian's eyes fluttered open to a boundless expanse of swirling light. Blinking, he found himself facing Natsu, Urza, and Grey, his fellow dragon slayers, each wearing the same mix of shock and relief. Behind them towered 3 colossal dragons, whose very presence made the air crackle with ancient power. The first was Igneal, the Fire Dragon King, his scales glowing like molten gold. Beside him stood Grandile, the Sky Dragon King, whose pearlescent wings shimmered as though painted with dawn itself, and to their flank loomed Medalicana, the Iron Dragon King, her hide gleaming like tempered steel. Almost simultaneously, Natsu and the others regained consciousness. Their eyes widened, tears springing as they recognized the dragons who had raised and taught them, beings they had mourned as lost. Within moments they were rushing forward, pressing their foreheads to the dragons' great snouts in a torrent of joyful reunion. When at last they pulled back, Lucian swallowed hard and addressed Igneal. "Please," he said, voice trembling with urgency, "tell us what happened back then." Igneal lowered his massive head until their eyes met. A deep, rumbling sigh echoed through the spirit realm. "I had planned to wait until you and the others had grown stronger," he began, amber eyes clouding with memory. "But Zareth Dragneel had other designs." He paused, as if steeling himself, then continued. "Zareth came to me in secret, lusting after dragon's power. From a single strand of my hair, he forged the first dragon slayer magic, and from that magic, he created you, Natsu, and the others. Natsu himself proved to be the strongest demon Zareth ever made. It explains why the wand carved from your hair channels such incredible power." Lucian felt his heart pound as Igneal's tone grew more somber. "Not long after, the Black Dragon arose, more terrible than any foe we had faced. It hunted our kind relentlessly. Only those of us who fled to the northern continent escaped its wrath, but our numbers were few. Grandile, Medalicana, and I made a stand, yet even united we could not defeat it. We were forced into hiding, watching helplessly as darkness spread across the world." A hush fell over the group. The spirit realm's currents swirled above them, carrying secrets long buried. Now at last, the lost history of dragons and dragon slayers had been laid bare. And Lucian knew this was only the beginning of what they all must face. Chapter 7. The Eclipse of Dragons. Lucian settled onto the edge of Zaref's weathered oak desk, his heart pounding at the sight of the ancient tomes and arcane instruments strewn across its surface. Flickering candlelight danced over the wizard's lined face as Zaref closed a heavy grimoire and looked up. "Are you ready to hear the truth of the dragons?" he asked. Lucian nodded. Though barely 16, he already bore the weight of destiny upon his shoulders. Across the room, Anna, the celestial mage, hovered over a constellation chart, her silver hair drifting like starlight. With a soft nod, she signaled Zaref to begin. Long before our time, the skies belonged to the fire dragon king, Isarnis the Skyflame. Towering above the highest peaks, his scales glowed like molten amber, and his roar split the clouds. One autumn day, while seeking rare herbs in the Dragonspine forest, I, Zaref, encountered him. Though I arrived expecting a fearsome beast, I found instead a creature weary and curious. He bore no malice in his eyes, only an ancient loneliness. I offered him humility, and in return, he shared his secrets of draconic magic. A friendship blossomed between us, wizard and dragon, one that would change our world. But fate is seldom kind to such alliances. In my pursuit of knowledge, I created a demon named End, meant to guard my sanctum. End's power grew rapidly, far beyond my intention. When Isarnis discovered this abomination, he could not stand by. A violent clash erupted beneath a blood-red sky. End fought fiercely, its raw potential shocking us all, but it was no match for the Fire Dragon King's might. With a single thunderous strike, Isarnis shattered End's form, or so it seemed. In truth, End survived. His demonic essence fractured and sealed itself deep within what appeared to be a human child, and that child was Natsu Dragneel. He awoke at my doorstep, innocent, bereft of memory or power. Arcane energies bound within him, energies he would awaken only when the world needed him most. That was when Anna and I realized Isarnis was not the only draconic force that threatened us. Far to the north, the black dragon Babirius stirred, hungry for destruction. We needed champions, magic strong enough to slay a dragon of Night's own making, and so we devised a desperate plan. We gathered the realm's most promising youths, children whose affinity for magic shone like stars in the void. Natsu, brimming unknowingly with sealed power. Sting, whose speed was said to rival the desert wind. Rogue, whose shadowy spells bent the dimmest light. And you, Lucian, whose gift for elemental harmony has already far outpaced your years. Under Anna's guidance, we taught you dragon-slaying magic, spells forged from the very essence of dragonkind's ancient enemies. Each lesson pushed you to your limits. Then, when your training was complete, we opened the Eclipse Gate, my greatest creation. A rift between eras, it would carry you into the future, where magic burned hotter and conflicts raged fiercer. There you would hone your skills among new allies and adversaries alike, and when the time came, you would return home, united to face the Black Dragon together. Before sending you on that journey, we called upon two fallen dragons, the White Worm of Dawn and the Shadow Serpent of Dusk. As their mortal coils unraveled, they poured their final essence into crystalline cores, dragon-slaying crystals. Anna carefully implanted them into Sting and Rogue, so that even in the far-off future, their draconic souls would guide your team. Zaref's gaze found Lucian's. The candlelight trembled, and for a moment the room felt as vast as the timeless sky itself. "Now you know the stakes," Zaref said softly. "Your path is set. The Eclipse Gate awaits." Lucian closed his eyes, drawing in a steady breath. He could almost taste the arcane winds of tomorrow, smell the scorched earth of a battlefield where dragons soared and magic clashed. His hand drifted to the talisman at his belt, his focus, his promise. "I understand," he whispered. Anna smiled, her eyes bright as distant galaxies. "Then let us begin," she said, lifting her staff. A pale light grew at its tip, and the air behind them shimmered with possibility. Step by step, they prepared to walk through time's threshold, and to fulfill a destiny older than memory itself. Using the Dragon Soul technique, the Fire Dragon, the Iron Dragon, and the Sky Dragon slipped their souls into Natsu and the two others, holding their dragon seeds in check and preventing them from fully transforming. As long as the technique remained active, the three dragons were and visible. Once they withdrew, they would instantly dissipate. And that, in essence, was what had happened. 30 minutes later, Lucian ended the telepathic link and turned to face the Fire Dragon King. You said we should seek out the Star Spirit Mage Anna first, then find Jalal. If he's still alive, your tracking magic will reveal his location. They've already faced the Black Dragon and devised the original plan, so they know exactly what it takes to kill it. More than simply tapping their experience, Lucian was genuinely intrigued by both mages. Anna, as the strongest Star Spirit Mage of her era, was far better suited than Lucy to open the Eclipse Gate and carry out his dragon-swallowing plan. Lucian leaned forward, excitement bright in his eyes. And Jalal is an even greater prodigy. He's the world's foremost magical inventor. He's created spells of unbelievable power and summoned demons endowed with intelligence, tremendous strength, and a host of unique abilities. He truly is the living encyclopedia of arcane lore. If I could study with him, my magic would skyrocket. He glanced around the circle. As for Zareth versus the Black Dragon, even Zareth can't overcome it, not while the dragon remains immune to every spell and bound by ancient seals. In terms of raw magical knowledge, Zareth likely outstrips the dragon, but he still can't break those wards. He lowered his voice. Zareth, I advise you against seeking him out. He hasn't been the man he was 400 years ago. The chamber fell silent as everyone mulled over Lucian's words and the tale of Natsu and the other four mages. Then the first chairman, who had been watching quietly, furrowed his brow. His sudden change in expression drew every eye. Before Lucian could speak again, Makarov cleared his throat. Chairwoman Mavis, you knew Zareth, didn't you? Mavis's gaze lifted slowly. Her eyes were distant, haunted by memory. Yes, she whispered. He was my teacher, my lover, and the one who killed me. A storm of conflicting emotions crossed her face as she locked eyes with Lucian, revealing how deeply the past still haunted her. Everyone in the hall, Lucian included, stared at her in stunned silence. No one had ever imagined that Mavis, the first master of the guild, had once been entangled with Zareth, the notorious Black Mage. Rumors of a fiery, love-hate bond between her and Jalal had long swirled through the corridors, but this revelation eclipsed them all. When the murmurs died down, and the weight of the world's safety and the guild's rested on her shoulders, Mavis didn't hesitate. Calmly, she began to recount the truth of her past. I was born on Sirius Island, she said softly, to parents who served proudly in the Red Lizard Wizard Guild. I was only 6 when they were lost on a dangerous mission. Left alone, I became the youngest errand girl in the guild, scrubbed floors, carried messages, and endured endless taunts from fellow wizards. My only solace was the guild library. Its shelves brimmed with tomes of spells and forgotten lore, and there I stole every moment I could to learn. But peace was fleeting. Not long after my parents' deaths, the rival Blue Skull Guild descended on Sirius Island, laying waste to our home. I survived, barely, and lived in solitude until my 13th year, when fate brought me Proscito, Euridoria, and Volodchinkin. Then treasure hunters, now my closest friends. It was they who would shape the next chapter of my life and lead me straight into Zareth's shadow. Lucian, who would one day be remembered as Fairy Tale's second guildmaster, once journeyed to Magnolia alongside 3 other fledgling mages, Makarov's late father, an Ishgard IV king, and a 4th companion whose name time has nearly forgotten. Eager to make their mark, they set their sights on the notorious Blue Skull Guild. Their first assault, however, ended in humiliating defeat. Wounded and beaten, they fled into the surrounding forest to lick their wounds and rethink their strategy. There, by chance, they encountered Zareth, quietly enjoying a lone lunk break beneath the trees. Intrigued by the group's resolve, and perhaps by his own inscrutable designs, Zareth agreed to tutor them briefly in advanced magic. Under his tutelage, they absorbed his lessons at astonishing speed. Then, just as mysteriously as he'd appeared, Zareth vanished without a trace. Renewed in both skill and confidence, Lucian and his comrades returned to Magnolia for a second showdown with the Blue Skull. This time, they triumphed, but their victory carried a terrible price. In the aftermath of the battle, they unknowingly unleashed a terrible demon bound to the Blue Skull's name. As the demon raged toward his friends, Lucian made a desperate choice. He invoked fairy law, a supreme spell he had not yet fully mastered. The magic struck true, banishing the demon and saving his comrades, but its backlash was catastrophic. Lucian's body, caught in the spell's overwhelming power, was frozen at its present form. He never grew another inch. Not long after, Lucian and the 3 survivors founded a new guild in Magnolia City, Fairy Tale. Under his enduring leadership, it would grow into one of the greatest mage guilds Ishgard had ever seen. Chapter 470, The Albaris Empire. Second update. 3 years of hard-won peace unraveled the moment Yuri Doria became entangled once again with fate's cruelest twist. She had welcomed an unlikely godson, the infant Makarov, into her life, and in him she found a glimmer of hope and the true meaning of existence. But at the instant he first drew breath, a surge of uncontrollable death energy exploded from the child's tiny body. In an agonizing heartbeat, Makarov's mother was consumed by that curse. Horrified and grief-stricken, Yuri abandoned the guild and vanished into the night. Years passed in lonely wandering until a chance encounter brought her face to face with Zeref, another immortal damned by the same divine wrath. He revealed to Yuri the chilling origin of their mutual affliction. Long ago, she had dared to codify the law of fairies, and Zeref had forged a magic that dared trespass into the realm of gods. In vengeance, God Anxelram had cursed them both with immortality, and with a death aura so potent that every living thing they treasured, human, animal, even plant, would be obliterated in its path. They recognized in each other a mirror of suffering, and in time their shared pain bloomed into the most forbidden of comforts: love. For a moment, they allowed themselves to believe the curse could not harm them in the sanctuary of each other's arms. Then, at the precipice of that tender hope, they sealed their bond with a single fateful kiss. The very instant their lips met, Zeref's dormant curse flared anew, and once more, death claimed the life of the woman he loved. Desperate to undo this final tragedy, Zeref carried her lifeless body back to the guild's second-generation grandmaster. He poured every spell, every shred of arcane science he possessed into the attempt to revive her. But miracles do not bend so easily to mortal will. When the ritual was done, Yuri's human form was not restored. Instead, where her heart had stopped beating, there now pulsed something altogether unexpected. A fragile, ethereal heart of the fairies, trembling with the promise of a new and perilous beginning. Mavis's voice drifted through the silent chamber on Tenru Island. My soul has remained bound to this cenotaph ever since I passed. Occasionally, I sense Zeref's presence approaching, but because he doesn't bear the fairy tale emblem, he cannot see me here. This is the story of the two of us. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Over the decades, Zeref has changed more than you can imagine. He stifled every human emotion and founded the Albaris Empire on the western continent, using its people as mere pawns in a grand strategic gambit. I must warn you, seeking him out now would be fraught with danger. Makarov's eyes widened. Lucian, formerly George, leaned forward, intrigued. Master Makarov, have you heard of the Albaris Empire before? The old guildmaster nodded gravely. Indeed, what began nearly a century ago as a fledgling realm under Zeref's secret hand has blossomed into a superpower. The Albaris Empire now stands as a magical military state built on the alliance of 730 wizard guilds. Its most illustrious force, the 12 Shields of the Holy Guard, serves as his personal elite. Lucian exchanged a stunned glance with Makarov. Mavis's words hung in the air. Zeref, once a lonely outcast, was now the true emperor of a vast, unstoppable empire, and the fate of their world might rest on what happened next. Lucian sat rigidly before the ancient desk, the Magic Council's first president looming over him. Every wrinkle on the elder's face seemed carved by decades of secrets and sorrows. The god Serena, the president began in a low, solemn voice. You know her as the leader of Ishgar's 4 heavenly kings. 4 years ago, she betrayed the eastern continent and sided with the Albaris Empire. Lucian's heart thudded. Serena had been a paragon of power and justice. How could she have turned traitor? Back then, the president continued, the Albaris Empire on the western continent prepared to invade. Their target was the fairy heart, the luminous starlight that anchors all fairy magic. It's more than a mere crystal. It's the wellspring from which the fairies draw their life and power. He paused to let the weight of that truth settle in Lucian's mind. Then he sighed. Our only reprieve came from the Council's ultimate deterrence, the magic elf bomb, capable of annihilating armies in an instant, and the Fess magic pulse bomb, which could rend the very earth. Faced with those weapons, the Albari's forces withdrew. Lucian nodded, recalling the whispers of those dreadful armaments. But why did they covet the fairy heart so desperately? Lucian asked. To find that out, the president replied. We sent Meister, our most adept memory and teleportation mage, into the Empire's inner circles. He uncovered nearly everything, except the identity of the Albari's emperor. What is his name? Lucian leaned forward, voice hushed. A faint smile flickered across the president's stern features. Today, we finally learned it. Their ruler is none other than the black wizard Zeref. Lucian's pulse spiked at the name. Zeref, the most feared mage in history, reputed to have wrought unthinkable horrors. He pushed down his unease and met the president's gaze. Zeref's ultimate goal, the president said, is to seize the fairy heart itself. This crystal, the source of the first generation's power, is infinite magic made manifest. What he plans to do with it, we can only dread. Silence fell between them. Outside the council chamber, the fate of 2 continents, and perhaps the world, hung in the balance. Lucian clenched his fists. If Zeref succeeded, not only would the fairies be lost, but the very foundation of magic might crumble forever. Could he be missing the original vessel of the first? Or is there some deeper motive behind all this? And, apparently, there really are higher dimensional beings in our world, gods who exercise absolute control over life and death. Lucian listened intently as Makarov laid out the startling truth. He propped his chin on his hand, absorbing every word. Piece by piece, the Fire Dragon King's warning, Mavis's tale, and now Makarov's revelations, a clearer picture emerged. Zeref and Mavis had both fallen under the curse of Angzelram, the god who governs birth and demise, simply because they dared to create magics that offended him. Lucian had long suspected that deities existed, arcane treatises alluded to them, and the very presence of the star spirit realm hinted at powers beyond mortal ken. But he had never imagined these gods to be so petty. To punish humans, merely for expanding the frontiers of magic, it was incomprehensible. He still didn't know which of Zeref's spells had earned Angzelram's wrath, but Mavis's fairy law, born of kindness and balance, was hardly the stuff of malevolence. Now that the existence of these divine arbiters was no longer in doubt, Lucian resolved to be far more cautious. The age of reckless experimentation was over. From this moment on, every incantation would be weighed against the ever-watchful gaze of the gods. Lucian stared into the shifting void before him, recalling how he once believed the Black Dragon to be the pinnacle of this world's power. Now he knew better. The Black Dragon was but one force among many. There were gods who governed life and death, and still greater deities beyond them. It wasn't entirely discouraging. Someday, once he'd grown strong enough, he might even stand a chance to commune with those higher gods. But until he achieved at least a cosmic-level power, it would be suicide to challenge them. For now, his priorities were clear. Uncover Zeref's true purpose, determine whether they could enlist him against the Black Dragon, and then journey to the Western continent to gather more magic. That last step would be crucial. Lucian closed his eyes and turned to the others. "All right," he said. "What do you think?" Natsu sprang to his feet, fiery determination in his eyes. "We head for the Western continent. Zeref owes us an explanation." He clenched his fists. I need to know if I'm truly the demon he created, and why. Ever since our meeting on Tenru Island a year ago, his words have haunted me. "I'm with you," Lucian confirmed. Gajeel crossed his arms, a fierce grin tugging at his lips. "Fairy Tale's been threatened. If Zeref's targeting our guild, the worst we'll get is a fight, and I never back down from a scrap." "Then it's settled," Lucian said, meeting each of their gazes in turn. "We press on to the Western continent, and we make Zeref answer for what he's done." With that, the trio set their course into the unknown, ready to confront both ancient gods and the mysteries that awaited them there. Lucian sat at the head of the long oak table, watching his guildmates debate the Albarez Empire's next move. Minerva, ever regal, fanned herself lightly and offered a cool smile. "Retreat?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "We're the strongest guild in Fiora. We don't have that option." One by one, the others nodded in agreement. The wizards who had once answered to the Swordbite Tiger banner, now firmly under Fairy Tale's colors, held up their hands in solidarity. Laxus slammed his fist on the table. Since the Civil War's end, he'd vowed to defend every member of the guild. "If the Empire's coming after us," he growled, "then we'll strike first." Lark and the rest of the Thunder Gods roared approval. "No way we wait to be ambushed." Lark cried. Elfman cracked his knuckles eagerly. "Exactly. The magic elves' power is shattered. They'll do anything to regain strength. Better we take the fight to them while they're weak." Urza crossed her arms, her armor plates clinking softly. She nodded, fierce determination in her eyes. "We've always been known for charging and headlong. Knowing the Empire's might only fires us up more." A softer chorus followed from the far side of the table. Lucy Hartfilia, Rebe McGarden, and Macau Conbolt exchanged uneasy glances. Lucy cleared her throat. "Isn't outright assault a bit reckless? Maybe we should gather more intel first." Macau tapped the table, his brow furrowed. "We can't underestimate them. If we strike without a plan, we risk everything." Lucian met their worried gazes in turn. He understood their caution, but he also knew Fairy Tale thrived on boldness. Drawing a slow breath, he leaned forward. "We'll split our forces. A swift strike team will harry their frontier outposts, drawing them in. Meanwhile, a scouting party gathers intelligence on their main army. If at any point things turn south, we fall back and fight another day." Agreed? Heads nodded around the table, some enthusiastically, others still hesitant but willing. Lucian allowed himself a small, confident smile. "All right, then. Let's show the Albaraz Empire why they picked a fight with the wrong guild." With that, the meeting broke up, and Fairy Tale's greatest wizards rose to prepare, united, fierce, and ready to seize the initiative. Lucian sat in tense silence as the council chamber buzzed with frantic debate. Across the table, Makarov folded his arms and surveyed the assembled guild masters. "Our adversary is no ordinary kingdom," he began, his voice low and deliberate. "The Alvarez Empire spans 730 mage guilds, and at its heart stands Zeref, an immortal sorcerer whose power has only grown over centuries. His armies of magicians could wipe us from the map in an instant." A murmur ran through the hall. Lucian studied Makarov's stern expression, knowing the old man would not speak lightly. "We cannot rush into war," Makarov continued, slamming his palm against the wooden table. "It's too perilous. I will journey to the Western continent and meet with Zeref myself. We'll gauge his intentions first. Only then can we decide how to proceed." The clamor died away as every eye turned to Makarov. He let the silence hang for a moment, letting his words sink in. Then, with measured calm, he added, "A frontal assault against the Alvarez Empire would be suicide. We owe it to every mage under our banner to seek any chance of diplomacy before raising our wands in battle." Lucian nodded, resolved. The path ahead would be fraught with danger, but they would not walk it blindly. Chapter 471, Journey to the Western Continent. "No, I won't agree to this." At President Makarov's suggestion that he negotiate with Zeref alone, objections erupted around the guild hall. The first-generation mages warned that Zeref's nature hadn't truly changed. If Makarov went unaccompanied, he'd be walking into a death trap. Makarov opened his mouth to argue further, but before he could continue, Lucian rose to his feet. "Enough." He raised his hand, quietly weaving a silencing spell that stilled every voice in the room. The flicker of magic passed over the assembled guild members, and a hush fell like a soft blanket. Once the murmurs faded, Lucian spoke, his tone steady and authoritative. "President Makarov, I appreciate your willingness to negotiate, but the guild's operations can't halt while you're away. You'll remain here to oversee affairs and ensure our mages stay safe. I will lead the expedition personally." Eyes turned to Lucian as he continued. "I'll assemble our finest team and journey to the Albaraz Empire in the Western Continent to parley with Zeref. I promise you, while I can't guarantee we'll overpower him if things go awry, I will bring every member of this mission home." A tense silence followed. Zeref's power was still largely unknown, but if he couldn't fell the Black Dragon by now, Lucian reasoned, then with careful planning and capable allies, they stood a real chance of completing their mission and returning safely. Lucian tapped his comlink, voice calm and confident. "I'm proficient in time and space magic, so while I might not be able to defeat him outright, I can at least shepherd everyone to safety. Think of it as a live exercise. We'll all gain precious battlefield experience, shore up our strengths, and make up for the time we've lost this past year. And it never hurts to have extra hands on deck. Jalal and Gildarts are both Saint 10-level wizards, after all. What do you say? He unmuted his channel and smiled. A moment later, every face in the room was nodding. Even Makarov, the guildmaster, had to relent. Lucian had led them wisely before. There was no reason to doubt him now. I'll go with you, Makarov offered. If things get rough, I'll step in. At that, the first generation's ghostly form flickered into view. Though incorporeal, she wasn't without power. Thanks to the guild's magic seals and the collective mana of its members, she could still cast spells, just as she had during the Goblin Ball incident. If they ever faced an enemy beyond their control, she could unleash her fairy sphere once more. And Lucian would be there to handle the fallout. All right, Lucian said, lowering his comlink. Let's take 3 days to rest and prepare. After that, I'll go find Miss Anna. Chapter X, The Chase Across the Sea. 3 days until we set sail for the Western continent. Lucian felt a surge of excitement. If the first-generation mages agreed to join them, perhaps together they could bring Jalal to heal without bloodshed. With those plans settled, the group dispersed to handle their personal affairs. After a year apart, everyone needed time, so Lucian gave them 3 days before the expedition's departure. The very next morning, he activated his tracking spell. A slender, golden arrow flickered into being above his palm, pointing in a single, unwavering direction. He frowned at the distance it indicated. It's really far away. He mounted his winged steed and hurtled into the sky. For 3 relentless hours, he followed the arrow's guidance over mountains and endless plains. Finally, the ocean's vast expanse spread below him, its waves catching the sunlight like scattered diamonds. There, anchored on the blue horizon, was a small magic vessel, bobbing gently on the swell. The arrow hovered directly over it. Lucian banked sharply and dropped toward the deck, heart hammering. As he drew near, he noticed something even stranger, an imperceptible fissure in the air just above the boat's hull. It shimmered like a heat haze, but when he channeled a trace of arcane sight, silvery currents of distorted space revealed themselves. That was no ordinary ripple. It was a crack formed by time magic, raw, violent power that bent the very fabric of reality. Lucian landed with a soft thud, eyes narrowed. Anna had used temporal spells powerful enough to tear open the sky itself, and he was just in time to witness it. His next move would have to be swift. Whether he came in peace or for confrontation, he was determined to learn exactly what she'd been doing out here, and why. He'd sensed a surge of temporal energy when he unleashed the fairy ball spell, and Xiaolong had felt something similar the first time he froze time with the hourglass card, but neither came close to the savage intensity of the rift's power. Suddenly, Lucian understood why Anna had vanished all these years. Aboard the ship, Anna sat cross-legged in her small cabin, meditating as she often did. The instant the rift tore open in the sky, its pull trembled through her senses. Before she could fully gather her wits, a knock sounded at the door. Startled, she sprang to her feet and swung the door open. On the threshold stood a diminutive golden cat, propped up on its hind legs. Anna blinked in disbelief. "Pardon me, are you Miss Anna Hartfilia?" The cat straightened its whiskers and gave a polite nod. "Miss Hartfilia, my Lord Lucian, current Guildmaster of Fairy Tale, requests an audience with you. Would now be a convenient time?" Fairy Tale Guild. Anna's pulse leapt. She knew of the famous guild, of its heroes and legends. Feeling her heart pound, she stepped back to let the cat enter. "Please come in." When Anna first emerged from the Eclipse Gate, a terrible accident scattered the 5 Natsu children across the continent. For the next 2 years, she devoted herself to tracking them down. In the course of her search, she uncovered a rift in time, a fracture caused by her own use of the Eclipse Gate to travel into the future. That disruption had thrown the world's timeline into chaos, forcing reality itself to begin a process of self-repair. Anna realized that if she could learn to control the rift, opening or closing it at will, she might harness its power to seal the black dragon trapped within. Finally, she located all 5 wards and found them prospering in their new lives. Natsu, in particular, had joined the Fairy Tale Guild, where he was welcomed and protected by its members. Pleased by their kindness, Anna chose not to interfere with his destiny. Instead, she set herself beneath the time rift, watching over it from the shadows. That's where Lucian found her. Stepping into Anna's cabin, he offered a curt nod. "No need for preludes," he said. "Here's what we know." Then, without hesitation, he laid out everything: the scattered children, the origin of the time rift, and the looming threat of the Black Dragon. When he finished, Anna returned his stare and quietly recounted her own discoveries. After a moment's reflection, she exhaled and met Lucian's eyes. "Very well," she said. "I'll go with you." I'd spent years hunting for Jalal, but it never occurred to me that he'd become the emperor of the Western continent. No wonder he'd always eluded me. It was Jalal's own scheme to send our 5 wards into a future brimming with stronger magic, so that once grown, they'd have the power to slay the Black Dragon. Naturally, the moment I arrived here, I set out to find him. Instead of a hero's welcome, I uncovered only dark whispers. That Jalal had become the most notorious of black magicians, summoning hordes of demons and leaving entire kingdoms in ashes. Everyone believed he'd died long ago. I scoured every city and fortress across the continent, but found no trace of him. Convinced he'd perished in some mysterious accident, I refocused my efforts on mastering the time rift. Once I control that dimensional tier, I'll wait for our 5 champions to come of age, and then we'll seal the Black Dragon within its depths. And if Jalal truly survives and commands a vast empire, I can recruit his aid, boosting our chances by another %. As for our other allies, Natsu, the first-generation Fire Dragon King, and Anna remain steadfast friends of Zareth. Lucian always favored diplomacy first. By combining their efforts, he believed they could resolve most conflicts without drawing swords. When facing an enemy whose strength he couldn't assess, he still pursued a peaceful outcome. But if talks broke down and battle became inevitable, Lucian had a clear rule. If he could overpower his foes, he'd fight. If not, he'd withdraw, regroup, and grow stronger. This pragmatic philosophy had never failed him, and given the rapid pace of his own improvement, he was certain he'd reclaim any lost ground before long. Chapter 472, Golden Dragon Magical Spaceship, Update 1. 3 days later, at the gate of the Fairy Tale Guild, Lucian stood ready to depart. Around him were Guildarts, Jalal, Laxus, Urza, Minerva, the original generation of Guildmasters, Anna, and every other member ranked S-Class. Master Makarov stood before them, offering his blessings one last time. Natsu, brimming with impatience, broke the silence. "All right, boss, what's the plan? Do we head to the port, catch a ship to the Western continent, and then sneak into the palace?" Lucian smiled, then reached into his dimensional dressing space. He withdrew a small model spaceship, no larger than his hand, and tossed it into the air. Instantly, it began to grow, golden scales unfolding and wings spreading until it stood above them as a colossal dragon-shaped spacecraft. "Sneaking in?" Lucian asked, arms folded across his chest. "We're Fairy Tale, the strongest guild on the eastern continent. We don't skulk around in shadows. We arrive with pride, pay our respects, and if battle comes, we fight head-on." He waved toward the majestic vessel. "This is the Golden Dragon, my own design. I combined alchemical breakthroughs from countless worlds with advanced refinement techniques I developed while studying the fairy ball. It's our transport and our statement. All aboard." As the golden beast's jaws parted into a boarding ramp, excitement rippled through the guild members. With Lucian at the helm, Fairy Tale would make an entrance no one could ignore. Lucian's new magic ship was the talk of the guild long before anyone saw it. Rumor had it the vessel possessed its own consciousness, could turn invisible on command, was protected by an impenetrable barrier, contained an almost limitless interior, and could shift its size at will. After all, Fairy Tale prided itself on being the strongest guild around. If the rival Cyan Pegasus could field a magic spaceship, why should we still be relying on steam trains and horse-drawn carriages for every major mission? That afternoon, every doubter was silenced. A massive, gleaming golden craft appeared in the sky above the guild hall and began its slow descent into the courtyard. Even veterans who'd seen dozens of magic vessels gaped at the sheer scale and polish of this one. "Is that our ship?" Mira breathed, shading her eyes against the midday sun. A dragon motif embossed along the hull shimmered as if alive. Then, in a deep, resonant voice that seemed to vibrate through the very cobblestones, the image stirred. The dragon bowed its head in unison with the ship's tilt, fixing Lucian with a solemn, intelligent gaze. "Master Lucian," it rumbled, "how may I serve you?" For a stunned heartbeat, no one moved. Then the courtyard erupted into exclamations of wonder. It talked. I've never seen anything like it. Even those who'd enjoyed Lucian's previous inventions, pocket portals, enchanted door keys, detachable defense orbs, found this beyond imagination. Lucian stepped forward, hands tucked into his coat pockets, his voice calm despite the buzz of excitement around him. "Welcome home, Golden Dragon," he said, eyes bright. "We've got a guild to protect and adventures to conquer." With that, the ship's defensive barrier shimmered into place overhead, and the guild members hurried aboard, eager to explore their new flagship. Fairy Tale was about to take flight in style, courtesy of its brilliant artificer, Lucian. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw a massive magical vessel, alive with its own consciousness, gliding above the docks. In just 1 year since the guild's sealing, everything had changed. President Mao Mao had truly outdone himself. "This is Jin Long," Mao Mao announced as the ship hovered in place. "He's not just our transport, he's a full member of the guild. Treat him as a comrade, and after a while you won't even notice the motion." I stepped forward and signaled to the Golden Dragon, and a brilliant gold filigreed ramp unfolded to meet us. Turning to Natsu, Laxus, and Gajeel, I added, "If you're still worried about seasick Nod, there's a special zero-gravity chamber on board. It's outfitted with levitation enchantments and spatial stabilizing runes. Once you're inside, you'll feel like you're floating in space. No up, no down, no queasy stomach." The Dragon Slayers exchanged eager looks. I climbed the ramp, feeling the ship's gentle hum beneath my boots. Retracting his ramp behind us, Jin Long's hull glowed softly. "Golden Dragon," I called, laying a hand on the ship's side, "chart a course for open water." With a deep, resonant growl, Jin Long lifted into the sky, and we were underway. "Let's pay a visit to the Albus Empire, and stop by to see Zareth while we're at it." Perched on the ship's prow, the feline companion lifted a paw, channeling its magic into the runic engravings along the Golden Dragon's hull. Instantly, a shimmering wind shield bloomed into existence, bathing the vessel in a golden aura as it surged westward. In a single day, they cleaved the vast ocean and coasted into view of the western continent's rugged shoreline. But no sooner had they appeared than a squadron of Albus Empire magiships intercepted them. The massive vessels circled the Golden Dragon, their long magic cannon muzzles trained and ready. At the forefront, an Imperial Mage in gleaming armor leaned over the rail and barked, "This is Albus Empire territory. State your business." Lucian stepped forward and wove a super loudspeaker spell around his voice. His words echoed across the waves and up the coastline. "I am Lucian, master of the Fairy Tale Guild from the Eastern Continent. I request an immediate audience with His Majesty Spree of the Albus Empire. The matter concerns the Black Dragon Acnologia. Be sure someone's there to meet him." Though Zareth had taken the title Splee in the Albus Empire, hence the Western Continent's habit of calling him Emperor Splee, Lucian had no patience for etiquette. With a flick of his wrist, he wove an echo enchantment that amplified his voice until it rang clear all the way to the Imperial Palace. "You actually dare send the Magisters Guild from the Eastern Continent into Western territory? Have you summoned the Fairy Tale Guild and the Black Dragon Acnologia to back you? You're begging for death." The Imperial Mage leading the opposing force went pale at Lucian's proclamation. Everyone knew that 4 years ago, the Empire had readied an Eastern expedition, poised to overwhelm the Eastern Continent and unite both lands under one rule. Only His Majesty's sudden return had called off the invasion at the last moment. Even now, rumors of that aborted campaign lingered. No one in the West doubted that another push would come. And the Magisters Guild, with its fearsome reputation, was widely regarded as the Empire's inevitable adversary. Seize them alive, then send them straight to Vestalion's capital to face Minister Aquili's judgment. At the commander's order, several Imperial magic cruisers roared to life and bore down on the Golden Dragon. "Attack!" Natsu and the others braced themselves as the cruisers unleashed a salvo of energy beams. Lucian, however, raised a hand to halt their panic. "Don't worry, they're nothing but minnows. They can't punch through the Golden Dragon's defenses. We'll wait here until the real reinforcements arrive. Almost at once, the deck beneath the ship flared with arcane glyphs. A vast magic circle sprang to life, and the 5 elements Kabbalah barrier shimmered into existence around the Golden Dragon. Imperial cannon fire slammed into the barrier and simply vanished without a trace. Lucian gave a wry smile. "Why don't you all grab a bite? No need to rush." With a graceful wave of his hand, he invoked transfiguration magic. In an instant, a long table laden with sumptuous dishes and fine wines appeared on the deck. Realizing their assault had failed, everyone relaxed. Soon laughter and the clink of goblets filled the air as Natsu and the others settled in for an unhurried feast, confident in Lucian's steadfast protection. Lucian watched from the bridge as another volley of magic can on fire slammed into the Golden Dragon's wards and bounced right off. No matter how many shells they unleashed, the dragon's defenses held firm. Through his crystal communicator, the capital's emissaries confirmed what he already suspected. The East Continent Magic Guild was no ordinary foe. Reluctantly, Lucian gave the order to stand down. For nearly an hour, both ships sat locked in silence. Then, like a phantom rising from the mist, a second magic cruiser glided into view, hardly smaller than the Golden Dragon itself. It drifted to a halt just yards away. "It seems the commander has come in person," one of Lucian's lieutenants observed with equal parts relief and awe. A pulse of raw power throbbed through the air as the new cruiser's engines hummed. Lucian rose from his command chair, eyes narrowing. He'd felt mighty magic before, ancient dragon fire in the Northern Isles, but this presence was different. It eclipsed even the Saint-Level 10 sorcery of Gildarts and Jelal. For a heartbeat, Lucian wondered if he was facing Zareth himself. When the visitor finally stepped onto the Golden Dragon's deck, Lucian's surprise only deepened. Instead of a dark overlord, before him stood an elderly wizard. His robes were embroidered with shifting runes, his long white hair tied back neatly, and his eyes shone with centuries of arcane mastery. Lucian inclined his head in greeting. "Welcome aboard. May I ask your name?" The old wizard studied him for a moment, then offered a slight smile. "I am Malachi Erevan, senior archmage of the East Continent Guild. I trust we can resolve this standoff without further bloodshed." Lucian allowed himself a small nod. This was the pivot point, either an uneasy peace or the opening move in a far greater conflict. Whatever came next, he knew one thing for certain: the true battle had only just begun. Chapter 473, 12 Shields of the Holy Spirit, Second Update. Magic King, August drifted down from the hull of the Golden Dragon, his silver robes billowing and a glimmering wand in hand. "I am August, leader of the 12 Shields of the Empire," he announced, his voice calm yet carrying unmistakable authority. "By His Majesty's command, I have come to receive you. Which among you is President Lucian?" Perched on the deck's edge, Lucian, known back home as the President of Fairy Tale, brushed a paw through his golden fur, then extended one wing in greeting. At his subtle gesture, the shimmering defensive barrier around the ship dissolved. Under his soft-spoken assurance, the massive vessel's magic shield winked out, revealing its sleek, dragon-shaped hull. "I am President Lucian," the young mage cat replied, voice smooth and confident. "My thanks for your summons. I await His Majesty's invitation." August studied him with a flicker of surprise. Although this little golden cat looked diminutive, the aura around him resonated with raw power. Just moments ago, the Empire's warship had fired a sustained salvo of enchanted bombardments, and Lucian's barrier had shrugged them off without a tremor. No ordinary mage could channel that level of energy from hundreds of miles away, transmitting even the echoes of their battle to the capital. Clearly, this feline wizard was more formidable than he first appeared. "Then please, follow me to the capital," August said, inclining his head. His tone softened. "His Majesty awaits you in the Imperial Palace." Lucian folded his wings neatly against his back. He dipped a polite bow to August and the assembled shields. "Lead the way," he said, bright eyes gleaming. Despite August's surprise, an unspoken respect had already formed between them, and the Empire's greatest protectors would soon learn that Fairy Tale's president was no mere cat. Under his scrutiny, the cat showed no sign of distress. "All clear. Lead the way, Elder," Lucian said. He nodded once and made his way back to the Golden Dragon. On the deck, the fairy tale wizards stared up at August as he hovered effortlessly above them, their faces shadowed with concern. Though none of them were weak, they all felt the oppressive weight of his magic. "The 12 shields of the Holy Guard, they're more formidable than I imagined," Gildarts murmured, folding his arms. If even he could sense that crushing power, the rest of them were surely on edge. "Strange, I feel like I've seen him somewhere before. It's pulling at some memory I can't quite place." High atop the mainmast, the ghostly form of Mavis sat in silent contemplation, her gaze fixed on August as he stepped back onto his magic starship. Watching him depart, her brow furrowed with puzzlement. Nearby, Anna, transported 4 centuries into the future, wore the same bewildered expression. She thought of how much more abundant magic had become in this era, capable of producing sorcerers of incredible power, and a single question nagged at her mind. Was Zeref's founding of the Albaris Empire meant to unite the continent's arcane might for one ultimate goal, to slay the Black Dragon? "Pressure is motivation," August declared with a nod. "And that's a good thing." Lucian simply watched his guildmates' tense faces and said nothing. Apart from Gildarts and Jalal, even Laxus was showing signs of strain, just the kind of challenge they all needed to grow stronger. With August's flagship cutting a clear path ahead, they could be confident no Imperial magic cruisers would attempt an ambush. Before long, the Golden Dragon coasted into Vistalion, the sprawling capital of the Albaris Empire. From the ship's deck, the fairy tale wizard stared in awe. "This city is enormous," Urza exclaimed. It was true. Vistalion was more than 10 times the size of Fiora's capital. Although Fiora was the most formidable kingdom on the eastern continent, it was still only a kingdom. Albaris, by contrast, had ruled the entire western continent for centuries, and the scale of its capital spoke volumes. "Retrieve. Her," Lucian said, as the Golden Dragon's landing gear touched down. With a flick of his wrist, he activated his spatial magic, condensing the vessel until it fit neatly inside his personal dressing room. The guild disembarked onto cobblestone streets, lined with marble columns and gilded domes. The air hummed with the promise of opportunity, and, perhaps, the showdown they all knew was coming. Lucian led the way, determined to face the Empire's heart on his own terms. August walked a few paces ahead, quietly studying Lucian's magic. In his mind, he murmured, "This ability to change an object's size, it's eerily like Brandish's form magic. Could these really be spells from the guild my mother founded? It seems even more formidable than I'd heard." Behind him, the wizards of Fairy Tale and the Empire's envoys eyed one another warily. Lucian returned their glances coolly. He knew they recognized something familiar in his power, and perhaps in his blood. From the moment he was born, Lucian had possessed overwhelming magic. His mother, Mavis, had fallen victim to the curse of his father, Zeref, before he even took his first breath. The second-generation president of Fairy Tale, fearing the curse's corruption, sealed Lucian inside a crystal, and then abandoned him. Fate, however, had other plans. Zeref discovered the crystal one night, stunned to find an infant who bore the exact features of Mavis. Overcome by grief and longing, he claimed the child as his own and raised him on the western continent. Growing up at his father's side, Lucian learned about Fairy Tale's legends. Despite the Empire's current animosity toward the guild, driven by Zeref's obsession with the fairy heart, Lucian himself bore no personal grudge against the place his mother had built. Now at Zeref's side, Lucian marched through the city. They passed along broad cobblestone avenues lined with merchants' stalls, fountains, and arched bridges. Every building gleamed with fresh paint and polished brass. The air vibrated with the hum of townsfolk and the tolling of distant church bells. At last they came to the grand plaza before the king's palace. Towering marble columns framed a set of massive gilded doors. Intricate reliefs, heroes dueling dragons, wizards weaving spells, indicated the kingdom's storied history. Here the entire procession ground to a halt. Lucian slowed to a stop, heart steady. The moment had come to face the throne, and to show the world that blood, magic, and destiny would not be bound by the past. The palace before them thrummed with 12 massive magical signatures. One in particular blazed so fiercely it exhaled a deathly aura, as if intent on snuffing out any life nearby. "It's Zeref's power. He's really here," Anna whispered, her face draining of color as she recognized that unmistakable, fatal magic. But something's off, she added, brows furrowed. It isn't the same as before. Zaref's sorcery, forged over 4 centuries, always carries a chilling breath of death, but never this icy. Tonight it felt like the frigid heart of a 1,000-year-old glacier. Lucian, a newcomer to this world's hidden terrors, felt it too. His lungs constricted, and he swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. From their vantage point, the ghostly first-generation heroes stared at the palace with equal unease. One of them hissed, "Why can't I breathe?" Under that oppressive aura, even Lucy, usually the frailest of their group, shivered uncontrollably. Natsu and the others each took a tentative step forward, as if wading through quicksand. Only Gildarts and Jalal surged ahead without hesitation, their calm resolve the sole beacon of confidence in the gathering gloom. Except for Zaref, all 11 members of the 12 Shields are here. Lucian strode to the front, and a terrifying wave of magic erupted from him. The sheer force of his aura shattered the palace's oppressive atmosphere in an instant, easing the tension that had weighed on everyone. He hadn't even shifted into his dragon form, yet after countless world-clone trials in his feline guise, his power had soared to rival the greatest mages on the planet. "He's so much stronger than he was a year ago," murmured one bystander. Natsu and the others felt that surge of energy, their eyes widening in shock. They had always respected Lucian's strength, but until now, they'd gauged it by his performance on the 100-year mission to the northern continent, where he stood roughly alongside Gildarts and Jalal. Clearly, he'd long since left that tier behind. Even August, the reigning magic king who led them here, betrayed his astonishment. Lucian's raw magical output had eclipsed his own. While sheer mana volume doesn't tell the entire story of a wizard's skill, in this moment it spoke louder than words. Perhaps President Lucian's magical power exceeded even his own expectations, but it hardly mattered. No matter how formidable he was, he could not stand against the 12 Shields, especially with their father watching over them. If these warriors failed to win their father's approval, they might as well have been signing their own death warrants. Still, most among the 12 Shields were eager for conflict. They longed to invade the eastern continent and claim the fairy's heart as a trophy, to win their father's favor once and for all. Chapter 474, Hate Me, Brother, First Update. Lucian stepped into the grand hall and immediately sensed the oppressive atmosphere. At the far end, Zaref sat motionless on his obsidian throne, clad in a robe of midnight black magic. Below him stood 2 perfectly aligned rows of 11 sorcerers each, 22 in all, each one of them ranked well above the 10th saint level. Their gazes, cold or scornful or brimming with barely concealed hostility, followed every newcomer. None offered a friendly nod or a hint of welcome. Lucian found himself envying Augustus's position. At least the Magic King's courtiers showed him a veneer of respect. Augustus approached Zaref with a deep bow. "Your Majesty, all the prisoners have been brought before you." Zaref inclined his head slightly and motioned for Augustus to stand at his side. His dark eyes swept first toward the cluster of ancient ghost captives lodged against the wall, then shifted to Anna, who had flanked Lucian into the hall. Zaref's voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the chamber. "Anna." Anna straightened. Relief and urgency mingled in her tone. "It's been too long, Zaref. I've discovered a time crack, a tear in the flow of magic itself. I believe we can use it to seal away the Black Dragon." Zaref's lips curled into an almost imperceptible frown. "It's useless." He paused to let his words sink in. "I know that crack better than you do. It won't bind Acnologia. It will only feed him more power." Anna's face fell as Lucian felt a surge of dread ripple through the hall. If Zaref was right, their last hope against the Black Dragon might be a trap set for themselves. He can devour the power of time. Zaref had forged the Eclipse Gate and set his grand design in motion. When Anna arrived from 4 centuries hence, she immediately detected the temporal crack his time travel would create. He must have known she would sense it. But his research revealed a startling truth. The rift couldn't contain the Black Dragon. No one understood Acnologia's might better than Zaref. Before his draconic transformation, Acnologia had been Zaref's pupil in the darkest of magics. "It's useless." Anna's voice quivered, and she froze in place. All her painstaking preparations, every contingency, now seemed futile. A cold smile curled at Zeref's lips. A mere black dragon is nothing but an appetizer. When the time is right, I will face Acnologia myself. That battle will yield my 9th Dragonslayer crystal. Soon, all dragons will crumble before me. Silence fell. Then, a young wizard with flaming orange hair rose from his seat. The legendary Everstorm wheel was strapped across his back, and 8 distinct magical auras pulsed around him, each more potent than the last. Lucian felt the raw, unbridled power radiating off the newcomer, tempered by youthful confidence. "Ishgar's 4 heavenly kings' captain, God Serena," Lucian murmured, "the mightiest Dragonslayer wizard, wielder of 8 Dragonslayer crystals." As a Dragonslayer himself, Lucian recognized the man at once. Too arrogant. Lucian shook his head. Serena's magic was indeed formidable, far beyond even Makarov's Saint 10, stronger than Gildart's or Jelal. Yet the notion that she, or anyone, could slay the Black Dragon was sheer folly. No matter how potent the 8 Dragonslayer magics might be, they counted for nothing against a worm of such might. He had witnessed the Black Dragon's power firsthand. It was entirely in another league. "Natsu," Zeref's cold voice cut through the tension. "We meet again." Natsu tensed, ready to respond, but Zeref continued, his tone dripping with contempt. "You showed up much sooner than I anticipated, yet you remain as weak as ever. How do you expect to fulfill your mission in such a pitiful state? Perhaps I should give you a nudge, some motivation to hasten your growth." His gaze flicked over Serena dismissively, as if the young mage weren't even worth his attention. Then suddenly, his expression darkened, lost in painful memory. When he was still a child, Zeref had seen his parents and younger brother slaughtered by the Dragon Clan. Driven by grief and desperate to bring his brother back, he delved into forbidden studies, magic that tampered with life and death. The very spells he now wielded were born from that desperate gamble. And now, standing before them all, Zeref's resolve remained unshaken. He would stop at nothing to achieve his own ends, no matter the cost. Chapter 8. The Curse of Immortality. Lucian stood alone in the chamber's flickering torchlight, its stone walls lined with shelves of dusty tomes and vials of iridescent powder. In the center of the room sat an ornate iron brazier, its coals glowing with an otherworldly heat. He watched the embers pulse as if they held a heartbeat of their own, echoes of the unspeakable ritual he had once performed. Years ago, in his relentless pursuit of power, Lucian had sacrificed his younger brother's corpse to forge a flame demon unlike any other. The god Angselram, guardian of cosmic balance, had deemed the act unforgivable and cursed Lucian with undeath. At first, Lucian welcomed the curse's boon, an immortal body that would grant him all the time he needed to master the arcane arts. But as the centuries wore on, he came to understand the true horror of his fate. The curse's clause was merciless. Every soul he loved would be claimed by the god of death, one by one, until there was nothing left but his own unending agony. Worse than death itself, this eternal solitude gnawed at him more fiercely than any demon's blade. In desperation, Lucian began crafting countless powerful fiends, monsters he hoped might deliver the final blow and grant him a merciful release. Each summoning, however, ended in failure. None could drain the cursed immortal blood from his veins. Then Lucian remembered his first and greatest experiment. Natsu, the flame-born demon he had created before End. Sealed away within a crystalline fairy orb, Natsu had slept for decades, his potential locked behind magical wards. Lucian harbored a single, desperate hope. If Natsu could grow strong enough, perhaps he alone could kill the man who had made him. If even Natsu failed, Lucian would resort to the fairy heart fusion, an act that would tear open time itself, sending him back centuries to rewrite history and prevent his own fall. Tonight, Lucian had at last broken the seal. He stood before Natsu, who lay curled inside the orb's glassy cage, eyes closed. With a calculated flick of his wrist, Lucian shattered the barrier. Shards tinkled to the floor, and Natsu's chest rose in a startled breath as the magic drained from the prism around him. "Awake," Lucian intoned softly, watching the demon stir. "Rise, Natsu. Learn despair. Only then will your power ignite, and only then will you grow formidable enough to free me." Natsu sat up, eyes wide with confusion and latent fury. Lucian reached into his robes and withdrew a small crystal vial. Inside swirled a dark red liquid, the distilled anguish of countless souls. He uncorked it, letting the bitter fumes drift toward Natsu. As the demon inhaled, his pupils flared, pain and rage warping his features. Lucian watched dispassionately. This was only the beginning. He would push Natsu into true hopelessness, subject him to trials that would forge his will into an inferno powerful enough to challenge gods. Only then could Lucian hope for deliverance from his eternal curse. In the hush that followed, the newly awakened demon let out a low, primal growl. Lucian allowed himself a faint smile. The game had begun. Lucian's lips curled into a cold smile as he leaned forward. "Hatred is the fuel that will make Natsu grow stronger," he whispered, "and once he's powerful enough, we'll destroy him for our revenge." He turned to his brother, voice low and cruel. "Hate me, brother." He knew it sounded brutal, but in Lucian's mind, the method was disturbingly simple. If they eliminated everyone Natsu held dear, the fury he'd feel would send his power skyrocketing. As for the fairy's heart, all the better if it fell into Zeref's hands after ward. Across the chamber, Zeref's dark eyes gleamed with sudden, savage intent. Lucian frowned. According to everything he'd learned, Zeref coveted the fairy's heart, but he'd never shown such bloodthirsty zeal. Something else must be driving him. Clearing his throat, Lucian addressed Spree, whose broad shoulders strained against his embroidered robes. "Your Majesty, Spree, we seek an alliance. Together, the East and West continents can stand against the Black Dragon. There's no need for more bloodshed." Spree's regal features twisted into a sneer. "Why would I join forces with the East? Your armies are weak. If it weren't for His Majesty's interference, I could have overrun your entire continent with a single legion 4 years ago." Before Jalal could reply, a low snort cut through the tension. Agile Ram, the Desert King, one of the legendary 12 shields, stood with his dark skin gleaming, chest bare beneath the glare of the torches. His icy gaze swept across the council. "Strength isn't measured in numbers alone," he said, voice as hard as the dunes he ruled. "But perhaps you've forgotten the cost of arrogance." Lucian stood before Zeref's throne, the torches along the obsidian walls casting long shadows that seemed to breathe. Not long ago, he'd led his squadron across the western continent in a blistering campaign, toppling one kingdom after another. Scouts' peck reports had shown the eastern nations to be far weaker, ripe for conquest, he'd thought. It should have been easy, but now the ghostly visage of Jalal Fernandez glimmered inside the summoning orb beside Zeref, interrupting Lucian's thoughts. "Don't forget," Jalal said, his tone as cutting as ever, "the Magic Council still holds the pulse bomb fizz. Isn't that why you halted your invasion 4 years ago?" Zeref leaned forward, his dark robes rustling like distant thunder. "The pulse bomb?" he asked, voice low but amused. "That destructive rune was my own invention. Why would I fear it? No, the only reason I called off the assault back then was because Natsu hadn't awakened his full strength." Lucian's gaze flicked between the two men. "So your fusion with the fairy's heart and your time rewind gambit were just plan B? A contingency in case Natsu actually managed to kill you?" "Exactly," Zeref confirmed, reclining. "If Natsu had been capable of ending me 4 years ago, there would have been no need to reroute my soul through the ages." Thoughtfully, Lucian ran a hand through his dark hair. "Then explain this to me," he said, voice steady. "You keep telling me I must grow stronger, that I have some mission to fulfill. What mission? Igniel claims I'm the demon you summoned into this world. So which is it? Am I your weapon or your creation?" A tense silence fell over the throne room. Flames danced in the torches, and the summoning orb's surface rippled as if eager to spill its secrets. At last, Zeref's shadowed face softened into something almost like regret. "You will know soon enough," he said. "But first, you must prove yourself ready." Outside, the wind sighed through the palace, carrying with it the promise of a confrontation that would shake both continents to their core. "Explain it to me." Natsu, who'd stayed silent until now, finally snapped. He lunged forward, jabbed a finger at Zeref, and shouted, "Explain yourself." Chapter 475, Detaining the Spirit and Sending General Mavis, second update. "How dare you insult the Emperor?" A chorus of outrage erupted from the 12 holy shields at Lucian's brazen words. In their eyes, Emperor Zeref was more than a sovereign. He was the divine founder who had forged the empire with his own strength, ended the western continent's chaos, and brought about decades of peace. Not a single line of age marred his face. To them, he was a living god. How could Lucian speak to him so defiantly? Zareth raised a hand, signaling the shields to stand down. He fixed Lucian with a look of profound sadness. He regretted having to take this course of action, but he saw no alternative. "Racked," he said quietly. "Spare only him. Eliminate everyone else." "Father," came the swift reply. From Zareth's right stepped Racked Dragneel, one of the very first demons the Emperor ever created, and by far one of the most formidable. Clad in dark robes and bearing a silver cross, Racked wore his shared surname with pride. At Zareth's command, he pressed his palms together and unleashed a broad sleep spell. A soft, humming wave of magic rippled through the grand hall, and one by one, the wizards of Fairy Tale collapsed into slumber, every single one but Lucian. "Sleep of death!" Laquette's voice rang out, and a surge of potent magic washed over the battlefield. In an instant, the eyelids of every Fairy Tale member began to droop. Gildarts rubbed his eyes, staggering. Beside him, Jalal and even Laxus, normally impervious to ordinary sleep magics, found themselves weakening. If Laquette's enchantment could bypass Laxus's brute force resistance, it spelled disaster for the entire guild. One of the 12 holy shields here meant a swift, utter rout for Fairy Tale. Flashing a triumphant grin, Laquette taunted, "Not even Acnologia could resist my power. None can escape. No one." A soft cough echoed behind her. Lucian stepped forward, his azure tail brush flicking with quiet confidence. A ribbon of cerulean light trailed from his fingertips toward the faltering guild members. "You're strong, I'll give you that," Lucian said coolly. "But arrogance blinds you. They've never known defeat on the Western continent, so your trick worked too well." He raised his staff, voice steady and commanding. "Reawakening." The blue light blossomed around each fallen mage, gently stirring them from the grip of slumber. Eyelids fluttered open, clarity and resolve returning to weary eyes. Fairy Tale stood renewed, and the tide of battle had just turned. Lucian had spent months reworking nearly every single target spell in the wizarding world, transforming them into potent, long-range attacks. His crowning achievement was a new, lightning-chained resurrection charm. When he unleashed it across the battlefield, bolts of crackling blue energy leaped from wizard to wizard, instantly reviving every fallen member of Fairy Tale, and shattering Racked's all-powerful sleep enchantment in a single stroke. Across the courtyard, Zareth and the 12 holy shields stared in stunned silence. A sleep curse of that magnitude should have been unbreakable, even for them. Racked himself snarled as the last vestiges of his magic fizzled away. He drew an ornately carved cross from beneath his cloak, his personal weapon, and leveled it at Lucian. "I never wanted to soil my father's palace," he spat. "I intended to let you all die quietly, but if you're so eager for death, don't blame me." He charged, the cross crackling with dark energy, but Lucian was already one step ahead. With a calm gesture and a soft incantation, he unleashed his perfected lullaby charm. The air pulsed with ethereal notes that wound around Racked like gentle vines, pulling him beneath their influence. "Sleep well, little one," Lucian whispered, and within moments, Racked's defiant glare gave way to the slack features of deep, unbreakable slumber. In that instant, Lucian's mastery of both life and sleep magic had once again turned the tide of battle. Lucian had mastered every form of sleep, magic he could find, arcane lullabies native to this world, the Somnus charm borrowed from Harry Potter, and even the legendary hymn said to have put Morgoth himself to sleep. By weaving these spells into one, his enchantment far outstripped Laquette's best efforts. Channeling every ounce of his power into a single piercing lullaby, Lucian aimed it directly at his opponent. Laquette's eyes widened in shock as a wave of drowsiness clouded his mind. He staggered once, then collapsed with a strangled cry, his vision rolling back as he fell into a deep coma. The 12 shield guardians who flanked the throne room froze, their faces draining of color. Until this moment, they'd dismissed the other Fairy Tale wizards as mediocre. But if their president, the Golden Cat Mavis, was any indication, their true strength was anything but ordinary. Before panic could spread, Lucian raised his voice. "Your Majesty Spry, please stand down for a moment. President Mavis wishes to speak with you. There is much she must say." Behind his composed tone, Lucian's thoughts raced. Something about Zareth's camp still lay hidden, a secret that might tip the balance of this standoff. If Mavis's words failed to calm the situation, Lucian was ready to play his last card and force a decision on the battlefield. Lucian had made up his mind. If he had to fight, it would be here, on Western Empire soil. A victory meant he could absorb every memory of the Empire, including Zaref's own recollections. A defeat, at worst, he'd send everyone back to the Eastern continent. Wait! At Mavis's name, Zaref's assault faltered. He raised an arm, and the 12 Holy Guard shields recoiled. Though Mavis was dead, her presence pulsed here just as vividly as it had on Tenru Island. President Mavis, please hang on a moment. Lucian glanced at the ghostly form of Mavis beside him. She gave him a small, determined nod. Ordinarily, only fairy tale wizards could see her spectral shape. To make Zaref perceive her would require a trick. Fortunately, Lucian's new clone had discovered a solution. By Juling's command, dispatch the generals. Lucian thrust out his hand. His magic condensed into a swirl of inky black energy that coiled around Mavis's incorporeal form. Under Juling's authority, her soul, enshrouded in that dark aura, was drawn into Lucian's body. In an instant, the spirit convergence was complete. Lucian barely had time to steady himself. Though he'd only just mastered the summoning ritual, his quarry offered no resistance, and the spell unfolded without a hitch. Come forth, he commanded. A moment later, Lucian swept his hand through the charged air, and before every witness, Mavis's soul, glowing with chi, coalesced into solid form. She hovered there, as real as life itself. Stepping forward, she fixed her gaze on Zaref. Zaref, she said gently but firmly, I know the fear that haunts you. I can lift your curse and end your unwanted immortality. In that instant, the true purpose behind her appearance became clear. Mavis bore the same deathly affliction as Zaref, and once she had been his closest confidant. During her long absence from fairy tale, she'd wandered the world, tormented by the one thing she craved most, final release. She understood better than anyone the agony of a life you wish would simply end. Mavis, Zaref's voice cracked. He stared at her in disbelief. I never imagined I'd see you again. A tremor of the death magic roiled within him, threatening to burst free, but he forced it down. His features hardened, and the cold mask of the immortal sorcerer slipped back into place. Yet beneath that icy facade, something had unquestionably changed. Chapter 476. Good, you have guts. Third update. Zaref let out a long, defeated sigh. It's no use. I've tried every method I know. Mavis, you can't do it either. Maybe only Natsu can succeed. He is the strongest demon I've ever created. I'm sorry, but I have no choice but to send the mages of your guild to their deaths. He rose from his throne and began to stride toward the rear chambers of the palace. Mavis's desperate cries trailed after him, but he paid them no mind. His tone was flat, emotion drained from his voice. I'm exhausted. Wipe out everyone here except Natsu. Then send the bodies and him back to the Eastern continent. That will settle it. Heaving back the tumult of his feelings had become a necessity. If the curse within him stirred, everything would collapse. He needed cold calculation now more than ever. Mavis watched him go, horror and dawning understanding in her eyes. This is why you brought us all here. From the shadows at the edge of the throne room, Lucian clenched his fists. At last, he saw the truth of Zaref's scheme. By slaughtering the guild's members, Zaref intended to stoke Natsu's hatred to its limit. Only when Natsu was consumed by grief and rage would he confront and kill Zaref, thereby severing the dark curse that held Zaref in its thrall. It was a mad plan, born of twisted desperation, and chillingly, it could succeed. Lucian took a steadying breath. The path ahead would cost lives, and perhaps demand sacrifices none of them could foresee. But now that the plan was clear, there was only one thing to do: survive the slaughter, save Natsu, and stop Zaref, no matter the cost. Since Natsu is the strongest of all demons, wielding draconic power, and you're a master of countless magics, even immortal, you could have honed your strength over the centuries. Why resort to such an extreme measure? After bearing that curse for so long, his mind is already fractured. Yes, your majesty! The 12 shields of the Saint Protector chorused, bowing deeply. Yet as soon as Zaref swept from the hall, they exchanged uneasy glances. None had realized their sovereign truly desired death. We can't just stand by and let him throw his life away, one shield murmured. Maybe if we speak to him, gently remind him there are other paths, he'll reconsider. Lucian caught the worried looks flitting across their faces. He understood. Zareth sought an end, but his loyal guards did not. If they dared refuse the order, the next step, Natsu's inevitable execution of Zareth, would still come to pass. Still, it was worth trying. "Allow me to reason with His Majesty," he offered. Before another word escaped his lips, Zareth's cold reply drifted back from the corridor. "No, no more words. Once Natsu is dead, my own death will follow. Nothing else matters." At that moment, Rakad, the Magic King's recent charge, pushed himself upright, determination blazing in his eyes. "The strongest demon. I am the strongest demon my father ever created." "That's perfect," Rakad said with a cold grin. "When the time comes, I'll claim I lost control of my power and accidentally killed him. It won't be the first time I've pulled a stunt like that." The Desert King inclined his head in agreement. The other members of the 12 Shields of the Saints stayed silent, but their expressions made it clear they approved. None of them would defy Zareth's orders, or let Natsu deliver the final blow on their master. Of course, Zareth had already predicted every step of this plan before he even slipped out of the palace walls. "Natsu can't grow without knowing true despair," Zareth mused as he vanished into the night. "If he dies in the process, I'll simply fall back on my ultimate contingency." The point, Zareth knew, was that the 12 Shields would never let Natsu walk away unharmed, and that was exactly how he wanted it. If Natsu survived this encounter, his power would skyrocket, fueled by the lingering hatred of those saints he would leave dead in his wake. Only then would he become strong enough to kill Zareth. And if he failed, well, the plan would collapse, but Zareth already had another trick up his sleeve. Lucian's mission left him little choice. Strike the Eastern continent, fuse the Goblin King's heart, then slip back through time and rewrite history itself. Yet here he stood in the grand throne room of the capital, face to face with the president, who, as if caught off guard by Lucian's calm persistence, opted for force over diplomacy. "Well, it seems our president finally decided words aren't enough," Lucian said, watching the older man's expression harden. "If you insist on this, then let's fight." Debate had reached its end. Lucian could launch an incantation or plead his case until he was hoarse, but nothing would sway the president now. Instead, he chose a different tactic. "At ease," Lucian murmured. He tapped his heel against the polished, marble-like floor. Almost at once, the smooth surface rippled, softening around their feet. Reflections elongated and fractured until, in a blink, everyone in the room was pulled into a vast, mirrored void, the palace's secret combat arena. The world went quiet, save for the faint hum of magic. A kaleidoscope of silver pillars stretched into infinity, each one a flawless reflection of the next. "If we fought inside the palace itself," Lucian continued, "we'd risk harming countless innocents. Here, none of the civilians can be caught in the crossfire." He gave a wry shrug. "Not that I'm truly worried about collateral damage, I simply can't afford to summon the Black Dragon by accident. I feel ready to face Zareth and the 12 Shields of the Saints' protectors, but the Black Dragon, that's another matter entirely." The president's eyes narrowed. "You assume too much," he replied coldly. "Do you really believe a single man, no matter how powerful, can bring ruin to the entire capital?" Lucian smiled, a flash of ice in his gaze. "I've taken on worse odds. If you'd rather test your strength than hear me out, then let's begin." With that, runes of crackling light sprang from Lucian's palm. Across the mirrored floor, the president drew his own arcane sigils. Neither would yield, neither could be convinced. In the endless reflections around them, their silhouettes prepared to clash, two wills set on a collision course that would decide not only the fate of the capital, but the very fabric of time itself. Lucian stood alone on the wind-baked plateau, his cloak whipping around him like a shadow. Before him, the Desert King and his 11 chosen lieutenants formed a half-circle in the dust. Turning his steely gaze on them, Lucian's voice rang out across the silent plain. "Even without anyone else's interference, I can destroy every one of you on my own." A ripple of tension ran through the assembled warlords. The Desert King's dark eyes narrowed, but he made no move to contradict him. Finally, he spoke in a low, measured tone. "Do you truly mean that, Lucian?" Just as Lucian was about to reveal the draconic power he'd long hidden, the Desert King's calm resolve gave him pause. Standing at Lucian's side, Mavis, the the first-generation archmage and strategist of their guild, lowered her voice to a whisper. "Your Grace, we should withdraw," she urged, her emerald robes fluttering in the dust-laden breeze. "For every one of them you fell, 11 more will take their place. These 12 warlords, their might overwhelms our best mages. We risk heavy losses if we press on." Mavis knew the numbers told a grim tale. The Desert King's champions were masters of elemental magic and close-quarters combat, far stronger than any ally they could summon in time. Even if Lucian unleashed his full power, the tide of battle would turn against them before the last blow was struck. Strike now, she thought, before hope dims altogether. Lucian inclined his head, offering her a reassuring smile. He brushed a hand through the air, as if sweeping away her fears. "Thank you for your counsel, Mavis," he said softly. "But I've been waiting for this moment. Trust me, opportunities like this are precious, and I'm not about to let it slide. I pee away." He straightened, letting his confidence fill the space between them. Around them, the warlords shifted uneasily, uncertain whether they faced a mere mortal or something far more formidable. Lucian's smirk deepened. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready. And in that readiness lay their true advantage. Indeed, with the guild's current roster of wizards, they couldn't hope to defeat the Holy 12 Shields if those 12 fought as a unit, let alone if Lucian were excluded. Their collective power simply isn't on the same level. However, if Lucian tackles only 1 or 2 shields at a time, there's a real chance of success. It helps that Lucian's body contains immense latent potential. The more desperate the situation, the more spectacularly he can unleash his abilities, and his resilience is legendary. At the moment, the enemy shows no sign of rushing forward. They're cocky enough to believe that a single opponent can't possibly be a threat to all of them. That arrogance works to Lucian's advantage. He can pick off the Holy 12 Shield's members one by one, sharpening his skills with each duel. Even when his mana runs dry or his wounds run deep, he can heal and recharge. After all, when he first arrived, he quickly earned a reputation for unparalleled support magic. No matter how many shields he ultimately overcomes, this confrontation will have bolstered the guild's mages immeasurably. By the time the rest of the Holy 12 Shields realize what's happening and attempt to intervene, it will be far too late. And this isn't arrogance, it's calculated strategy. Lucian knew that. So long as he didn't face an enemy vastly stronger than himself, defeat would always be a distant possibility. Power ratings meant nothing when your magic reserves were effectively limitless and your body healed itself as quickly as it took damage. He could fight for centuries on end without so much as a bruise slowing him down. Moments ago, he'd gone toe-to-toe with Jelal, and his instincts had warned him that even Jelal at full strength wasn't beyond his own capabilities. Now that Jelal, the greatest threat, lay vanquished, Lucian felt the edge of triumph sharpen within him. Before him stood the Desert King, a roiling figure of wind-blown sand. The king's voice boomed, each word shaking the dunes at their feet. "I, the Desert King, keep my promises," he declared with brutal pride. "For a time, none of you shall move an inch. I will bury you all beneath my desert." Lucian's lips curved into a wry smile. He lifted his hand and with a flourish shaped it into a playful cat's paw. "All right," he drawled, "you've got some nerve." The gesture was almost mocking, but his calm confidence buzzed with the knowledge that, no matter how many sands the Desert King summoned, he still held all the cards. Chapter 477. Gang Up. "Everyone, you've seen the battlefield for yourselves. If we fall back now, they'll read our retreat as weakness, and they'll be all but certain to launch a full-scale invasion of the eastern continent. Our orders are simple. Inflict as much damage on their forces as we can before we withdraw. The tougher we make this for them, the more cautious they'll become, and the more time we'll buy for regrouping." Lucian raised his massive claws toward the looming form of the Desert King, then turned to face Natsu and the rest of the fairy tale wizards. His expression was resolute. "This mission rests on our shoulders. Fairy tale must win." He knew that morale on the battlefield wasn't just about fooling the enemy. It was just as important to rally his own comrades. If they suspected he was ready to shoulder the heaviest fighting himself, they might slack off when every hand counted. Luckily, Fairy Tale's guild members were nothing if not hot-blooded. Once fired up, they'd charge straight into the fray without a second thought. And after only 3 days back from their last mission, none of them had a firm grasp on just how powerful Lucian had grown. Few believed he could meet the extraordinary challenges ahead, but today they would see exactly what he was capable of. Even the sharpest minds, caught up in the frenzy of the moment, probably couldn't have come up with something so simple yet effective on the spot. But when Lucian lifted his gauntleted hand and flashed the fairy tale salute, an electric charge rippled through the guild. To victory! At his cry, every member of Fairy Tale echoed the gesture and the shout. No more hesitation. Lucian's plan was clear. Smash through all 12 shields guarding the Desert King. With their guild at the height of its strength, they surged forward. Go! Lucian flexed his cat-like claws, and the wizards of Fairy Tale poured ahead in a single, unstoppable wave. The sheer force of their charge rattled the 12 shields' ranks. Spells erupted in rapid succession. Change garb, Skywheel armor, Fire Dragon's roar, Sky Dragon's roar, Thunder Dragon's roar, Justice Bringer, One Day, 7-star sword. Brilliant arcs of magic cascaded toward the Desert King's position, engulfing him beneath their combined power. Yet the Desert King, the sworn guardian of the 12 shields and a sorcerer on par with Ishgar's 4 kings, did not falter. With a roar of defiance, he summoned a violent sandstorm that roiled sky and earth, swallowing the first wave of Fairy Tale's assault and holding firm against their onslaught. A seasoned mage absorbed the full force of the Fairy Tale wizard's spell, and for the first time, his confident grin vanished. Clearly, Natsu's magic was far stronger than he'd reckoned, and the pressure forced his stance to stiffen. But having boasted moments before, he refused to cry for backup. Teeth clenched, he threw himself back into the fray. I underestimated them, he admitted under his breath. A short distance away, Lucian watched without stepping forward. His brow was furrowed in surprised respect. They really have grown, he murmured. The last time we faced them was during the Civil War. Since then, they've taken on the 6 demon generals, braved Daedalus, even conquered Sky Island. Of course their powers have surged. He shook his head. Still, we don't stand a chance, especially against those two. Beside him, Anna hovered anxiously. As a celestial wizard, her strength lay in her spirits, but she'd entrusted her spirit keys to her heirs. Without them at her side, her magic was all but sealed. Her hands were tied, and the battle felt more hopeless by the second. Mavis felt the weight of the battlefield pressing down on her. She knew all too well that, even if she managed to defeat the Desert King or a few more of the 12 shields, victory would still be out of reach. The very presence of the Magic King and the red-haired wizard at his side radiated an oppressive power that outstripped even Jalal's. She turned to Lucian. Lucian, with your magic as my anchor, I can take control of your mana flow. If you can't turn the tide quickly, I'll cast Fairy Ball to form a defensive barrier, and you'll use your spatial magic to teleport everyone to safety. Behind her eyes, Mavis was already mapping out their escape. Lucian had learned Fairy Ball himself, but in his hands it could only shield 2 or 3 people for a short time. With her ancient mastery over his power, however, she could conjure a dome large enough to envelop the entire guild, one even Jalal couldn't shatter in the blink of an eye. Once the barrier was up, Lucian's space magic would lead them all to retreat. Lucian merely raised a shoulder and flexed his cat-pawed hand. No need to rush, he said, amusement dancing in his eyes as he turned back to the fight. I've got this. Lucian had poured countless hours into mastering and refining his own magic, but standing shoulder to shoulder with Natsu and the others in today's battle had been an education in itself. He'd watched Natsu unleash roaring blaze dragons that carved arcs of fire through the dunes, Lucy spin dazzling spirit weaver illusions that bewildered the enemy, and Gray freeze entire battalions with a single breath of ice. Each new technique sparked fresh ideas in Lucian's mind. Then, with a final thunderous clash, Urza's blade struck true. The Desert King, a towering monstrosity of sand, bone, and blackened steel, crashed to the ground, defeated. A roar of triumph rose from the Fairy Tale wizards. We did it, Lucian whooped, adrenaline surging through him. In less than 5 minutes, the mightiest foe on the western continent had fallen. Fairy Tale's teamwork and raw power had simply overwhelmed him. Pride swelled in Lucian's chest, not just for the victory, but for having witnessed such spectacular magic in action. Before anyone else could move in to secure the battlefield, Lucian's form blurred. He appeared beside the motionless Desert King, who had been knocked unconscious by Urza's finishing blow. Kneeling, Lucian whispered the words of his soul search spell. A pale, rippling aura flowed from him into the fallen monarch's mind, unraveling every hidden incantation and memory stored there. Why had Lucian come rushing to the Western continent? Was it to slay the dreaded Black Dragon? To broker peace between East and West? To forge an alliance with Zareth? Those aims were nothing more than convenient covers, tasks he could have deferred for years. His true mission was far more ambitious, to seize every ounce of potent magic harbored in these lands, above all the forbidden arts locked away in Jelal's mind. The arcane treasures of the East had propelled his rise. Now he intended to plunder the West's greatest secrets. Lucian knew that the West continent was more powerful than the East, and its magic would naturally be stronger as well. His ultimate ambition in every world he entered was the same, to grow ever stronger. Only once his own strength had reached a sufficient level would he concern himself with secondary matters, like his duties as guild president. Rather than browbeat his members into endless drills, he preferred to guide them through carefully structured training sessions that rarely lasted more than a few hours. His many avatars, scattered across different realms, formed a self-reinforcing network of power. When one avatar improved, it unlocked resources that boosted the others. Those gains, in turn, flowed back to strengthen the original. It was a virtuous cycle of mutual enhancement. For Lucian, that meant calculated risks were worth taking whenever they promised rich rewards. Before venturing to the West continent, he hadn't been certain he could defeat Jelal, but as long as he knew escape was possible, he saw no reason not to try. Once Lucian secures the magic of the Western continent, his power will skyrocket, and every one of his avatars across the Multiverse will grow stronger alongside him. That boost could let his otherworld clones accomplish feats they could only dream of before. For example, a fully empowered Middle-earth avatar might finally slay Morgoth. From there, he could journey to the realm of the gods, train under the deities themselves, and return wielding even greater might. Those gains would then flow back to Lucian's fairy tale counterpart, enabling him to obliterate the Black Dragon in mere seconds. Chapter 478, Lust Update. Deploying more clones only amplifies the overall effect. Whenever there's profit to be had, Lucian will gladly expose himself, trusting that his counterparts in other worlds will grow stronger and secure the reward without risk. Yet because each clone reasons this way, their individual progress remains frustratingly slow. By the time they've all grown powerful enough to act safely, the gains from this particular world's clone might no longer matter. Clones are undeniably vital. They're the wellspring of Lucian's power, but they aren't irreplaceable. As long as the benefit outweighs the loss, sacrificing a clone is an acceptable price. For example, if a clone in another universe devours a rare natural treasure and boosts its strength 100-fold, even at the cost of its own life, it's a trade-off worth making. But above all, it's the original Lucian, the main body, that truly counts. If he falls, no new clones can ever be spawned. That's why, back in the primary Marvel universe, he conceals almost everything. In the other clone worlds, however, he adopts a simple rule: remain hidden whenever there's nothing to gain, and be utterly reckless the moment an opportunity presents itself. Lucian's heart sank as he watched Ajir, the Desert King, collapse to the sand, unconscious. How humiliating that a ruler of his stature should fall so easily. Before Lucian could react, Lakad pushed himself to his feet, eyes blazing with fury. "Stand aside," he growled. "I'll deal with them." Lucian rubbed his temples. He still felt the lingering haze of that cat's sleep magic, how that silent creature had slipped in and knocked him off his guard. He wouldn't make that mistake twice. "Be careful," he warned Lakad, stepping forward to stand at his side. Behind them, August, king of magic and leader of the 12 shields, narrowed his eyes. He despised Lakad's arrogance, the endless tardiness to every council meeting, the smug reminders that Lakad was Jelal's true-born son. But now was not the time for grudges. August's gaze flicked to the cat, its emerald eyes untroubled, tail flicking with casual amusement. It was far too composed for a mere enemy scout. Most of the 12 shields had held their power in reserve, confident that the Desert King and Lakad could handle these foes. August, however, wanted to test the enemy's strength for himself. If Lakad's next strike failed, if he fell again, August would not hesitate to unleash the other 9 shields in a single, overwhelming assault. He let his fingers crack with barely concealed energy. "Don't underestimate them," he muttered under his breath, ready to act the moment the battle turned against his allies. "Have you forgotten that I'm my father's secret weapon against acnologia?" Lakad let out a cold snort. In an instant, a blinding white light radiated from his entire body, washing over every warrior on the field. "Let me show you the true horror of desire." Before anyone could react, a chorus of startled cries filled the air. One by one, the fairy tale mages who had been charging at Lakade abruptly froze, their faces flushing crimson. They crumpled to the ground, moving as though their limbs no longer belonged to them, each emitting a strangled, breathy moan. Lucian, who had just finished tending to the wounded and fallen back to support the rear guard, felt it too. A creeping heat flooded his veins, stirring an unfamiliar longing deep in his chest. He clenched his teeth and focused every ounce of his willpower on expelling the influence, but it wouldn't budge. Lakaidi's magic was unlike any ordinary spell. It didn't attack the body, nor did it invade the spirit in a way that could be countered by physical or spiritual force. Instead, it preyed on the 7 basic human emotions, and in particular, lust. Even Lucian's formidable mental defenses could only dull the edge of its power. They offered no true protection. No wonder this sorcery could affect a magic-immune black dragon. Though it inflicted no direct injury, its subtle manipulation of desire rendered its victims dangerously helpless. And as the scattered fairy tale wizards writhed on the ground, Lakaidi stood tall and composed, a cruel smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Hold on to your will, Lucian," whispered one of the fallen mages, tears of frustration in her eyes. We can't let him." Lucian willed his racing heart to calm. Through the haze, he met Lakaidi's gaze. "This isn't over," he vowed, voice low but unyielding. Even as desire's chains threatened to drag him down, he steeled himself. He would fight this insidious magic, and he would save his friends from its grip. Lucian braced himself against the surge of illicit magic. In theory, as long as one's will remained unshakable, they could withstand Lakaide's enchantment and strike back. Of course, in this heightened combat state, a typical wizard could only draw on about 10% of his true power. Heaven and earth mysterious sect, root of all chi, cultivate 1,000,000,000 calamities and prove my magical might," Lucian intoned. The words formed a tapestry of energy around him, and a warm, golden light spilled outward, enveloping his body. Almost immediately, the heaving tide of lust that Lakad's spell had stirred within him began to ebb. "Thank the heavens for Taoist discipline," he muttered. He'd just mastered this golden light incantation through his new clone's teachings, and it was perfect for repelling corrupting influences. With his mind cleared, Lucian scanned his companions. To his surprise, several lay unmoved by Lakad's erotic sorcery. Only those who had known carnal desire before could be ensnared. Fresh-faced novices like Natsu, Lucy, Gray, and Wendy stood firm, their faces resolute and their combat prowess undiminished. Lakad's magic, Lucian realized, was potent, powerful enough to breach even the stoutest defenses, but it had a fatal flaw. It preyed only on those already touched by passion. As for the others, their innocence proved the strongest bulwark of all. Satisfied that his friends were beyond the spell's sway, Lucian tightened his grip on his staff. "All right, then," he said under his breath. "Let's show Lakad how we fight without reservations." With that, the golden glow flared once more, and Lucian stepped forward to meet his adversary. Lucian hovered over the glowing rune circle in the guild hall, watching the results tick in one by one. Those who were married, those with children, those known or rumored to have been intimate, Gildarts, Laxus, Minerva. Each of them stiffened and staggered as the magic revealed their secrets. In truth, Lucian had expected most of these readings. It was only a few surprises that made him blink. When Jalal's name appeared, followed by Urza's, Lucian's eyebrows shot up. They'd clearly crossed that line while he was off on the northern continent, something he hadn't suspected at all. Next came Gajil and Levi, both registering non-virgin. Mirajane, the guild's sultry poster girl, remained untouched by the spell. But the biggest shock of all was Mavis Vermilion. Even in her ghostly form, the enchantment recognized her as anything but innocent. Laquette's virgin detection magic worked on spirits. If Mavis had been kissed by Zareth before her death, cursed into mortality, and then killed by that very kiss, then there must have been far more between them than a single fateful peck. Lucian swallowed. Mavis had looked like a child when she died, but chronologically she'd been in her 20s. Zareth had been strong enough to destroy her, yes, but intimate enough to bind her soul? That revelation sent a chill through him far colder than any ghost's whisper. Lucian scanned the shattered battlefield. With heavy hitters like Gildarts, Jalal, Laxus, and Urza out of the fight, Minerva and the Swordbite Tiger Squad had already been routed. Only Natsu, Gray, and Lucy stood between Laquette and total victory, and even they were badly beaten. Wounds crisscrossed their bodies, and their magic was almost spent. From his vantage point, Lucian rose slightly, nelling healing energy into his allies. Cuts closed, pain receded, and strength returned, but still it wasn't enough. Frustration flared in his chest. "We can't let this go on," he muttered. "It ends now." Laquette glared at the replenished trio, impatience twisting his features. With a cruel smirk, he snapped his fingers. "Desire implantation!" Suddenly, hundreds of pale tentacles burst from the ground, whipping toward Natsu, Gray, and Lucy. The appendages coiled around their arms and legs, erupting with a foul, light-infused magic that flooded the captives with overwhelming lust. Their eyes glazed, their limbs slackened, their combative edge vanished. In an instant, Lucian sprinted forward. Dozens of sinuous limbs lunged at him, but he dodged with precise footwork. Drawing the god's edge, shadowless curse, a massive, rune-etched blade, he swung in a wide arc. Each strike sheared through the tentacles at their base, severing them before Laquette's enchantment could take hold. The light dissipated harmlessly, for pure-hearted combatants like Lucian were immune to such corrupting spells. As the last tentacle fell, Lucy collapsed to one knee, Gray shook off the haze, and Natsu's fire magic flickered back to life. Lucian gripped the hilt of his sword, heart pounding with renewed confidence. Laquette's cheap trick had failed. Now, the real battle could finally begin. The tentacle attack might work on most foes, but it's far too easy to dodge and shatter. Lucian let out a confident laugh. "Perfect. I've mastered this spell." In a crack of thunder, he vanished and reappeared high above Laquette. Superplasma electromagnetic cannon. A massive column of lightning surged from Lucian's outstretched palm, engulfing Laquette in blinding radiance. Drawing on every secret of thunder magic he'd gathered from countless worlds, Lucian unleashed its power at full strength. Even someone as formidable as Laquette, ranked among the Holy 12 Shields, could not endure the assault. The sheer force of the blast left him grievously wounded in a single devastating strike. Lucian's voice cut through the clamor. "Bring him here!" In a blink, Lucian had felled Laquette. He stepped forward, pressing his palm to Laquette's forehead, probing the lingering threads of magic woven into his mind. Desire magic caused no outward injury, but its insidious power could sap the will of even the mightiest fighter, turning a stalwart warrior into a quivering shadow of himself. If mastered, it was far more valuable than the Desert King's brute sorcery. Without his own training in the Taoist arts and the golden light curse of Longhu Mountain, Lucian would have been in serious peril the moment Laquette struck. Seeing Lucian dismantle Laquette so effortlessly, the Magic King's eyes narrowed with concern. "All 8 of you, except Irene, attack at once!" It might have seemed overkill, but the Magic King feared that if Lucian kept knocking out his champions one by one, the intruder might break free altogether. Better to swarm him now than risk losing track of his enemy, and, by extension, undermine the safety and order that His Majesty depended upon. 8 assailants closed in, their weapons gleaming. Irene alone hung back, her expression torn between duty and apprehension. Lucian met their advance with steady calm. He had weathered far greater storms than this, and he intended to prove it once again. Just to be safe, have those 8 strike together against the formidable feline. Lucian and Irene will stay behind to hold the line. If they falter, send in 2 more, 10 in all, and keep a close watch on Laquette. He's been knocked out and freed of that lust enchantment. Make sure none of the recently restored managed to slip away. At the Magic King's command, the 8 warriors blinked in surprise, then fell into formation and closed in on Lucian. The Golden Cat's power had far exceeded their expectations. None had imagined they'd need to coordinate as a unit. Each had believed he could handle this beast single-handedly. But an imperial order brooked no refusal. Among the 12 shields of the Holy Guard, 2 names carried particular weight: Magic King Augustus and Scarlet Despair Irene. From infancy, they had served alongside His Majesty and grown into the Empire's unrivaled sorcerers. Celebrated as the pillars of the Empire, their combined might eclipsed that of the 8 warriors now encircling Lucian. Irene barely glanced at the unfolding skirmish. Augustus was their leader, after all, and simply said, "Fine, I'll join in too." Lucian, having just absorbed Lakaide's memories, wasn't fazed when 8 assailants charged him at once, with 2 more looming behind to hem him in. He stretched, the muscles along his back rippling, then shifted into his sleek feline form. Today he would see if he could take down all 10 opponents without resorting to his dragon transformation, relying solely on the patchwork of magics he'd collected from countless worlds. It would also be the ultimate test of his current clone's strength. "Ice condensation," rang out a crisp, echoing command. The spellcaster was Inbel Yura, known throughout the ranks as General Winter. "My ice magic can even freeze other spells, eternal slumber for anyone who stands against me." A torrent of sub-zero air slammed into Lucian, frost blossoming across his fur in crystalline patterns. Yura's magic was leagues beyond the simpler ice spells Lucian had seen before. This chill carried the faint tug of suspended time. Lucian braced himself, realizing that if he triggered phantom displacement in the midst of this Arctic blast, its effects might be severely blunted. Now, more than ever, he needed to prove that his single clone could handle 10 skilled warriors on its own. "Since you wield ice, I'll answer with fire." A golden light flared around Lucian as he summoned every ounce of his power. Frost crystals pulsed and expanded on his skin before he opened his mouth and roared, "Drakesbane spell, tri-element flame." A torrent of dragon fire, inferno, and arcane fire, blessed by the wood dragon's might, erupted in a blazing column. It crashed through General Dong's sea barrier as if it were nothing. General Dong's face went pale. "What?" He slammed his hands to the ground and called upon his ultimate defense: absolute ice armor. In an instant, a suit of gleaming crystalline ice encased him. Legend said this armor could freeze anything it touched and shrug off the fiercest attacks. But Lucian's tri-element flame, unleashed at full power, melted its frosty plates within seconds. Shards of ice hissed and vanished. "Impossible." General Dong stammered as the last of his armor dissolved. Lucian allowed himself a small cat-like smile. First one down. With the battlefield unfolding before him, he readied himself for the next opponent. Lucian's golden aura flared as he planted his feet firmly on the frozen ground. "I'm not promising I can take on Zareth," he said, voice steady, "but I'll handle the lot of you." Natsu and the others stared in disbelief. Lucian, once just another guild recruit, was now manifesting Dragon Slayer magic. "He really mastered it on the northern continent," one of them whispered. Before they could register more, a ripple in the air signaled someone else's arrival. A woman in a flowing crimson cloak materialized behind Lucian, sword drawn and crackling with temporal energy. Time itself seemed to thicken around her. "Arrogant little golden cat," she sneered. "Prepare to be slaughtered. Even the strongest are nothing to my time magic." With a swift motion, she slid the blade against Lucian's neck. For a heartbeat, it hovered there, then froze in place. Lucian pivoted without a flicker of panic, eyes calm. "Sorry," he said quietly. "I happen to know a bit of time magic myself." The air snapped back into motion. Damalia's sword clattered harmlessly to the ground as seconds resumed ticking forward, and Lucian stood unscathed, a silent challenge in his gaze. Lucian's blade dance had proven unstoppable even against Ario Hiragi. Her time magic was no match for him, especially now that he'd perfected the fairy ball technique. "Go," he whispered, raising a single finger. In an instant, his metal control power flared to life. The sword of the War Princess spun free of his grasp, arcing through the air before driving straight into War Concubine John's midsection with titanic force. Lucian hadn't meant to kill her. He still needed her time magic intact. Invoke magic, God's soul, Chronos. John's eyes snapped shut. As she ingested the very essence of the time god, arcane energy roared through her veins and her form began to shine with divine radiance. With uncanny strength, she caught the spinning blade in her bare hands and gripped it as though it were a ribbon. How intriguing, she breathed. Lucian's heart raced with excitement. He'd long studied the art of spirit absorption, beasts, demons, even animals, but he'd never witnessed anyone receive a god's soul. If he could unlock this power for himself, might he one day draw on the celestial beings of Earth? There must be a flaw. Lucian hadn't even realized the danger before metal rang sharply against the shimmering golden barrier around him. An invisible blade had stabbed toward his chest, stopped only by his spell's deflecting light. He staggered back, breath-catching. I never saw it coming. This invisibility magic is extraordinary. With a swift motion, Lucian flicked his tail, the tip crackling with arcane energy. The unseen assailant hurtled backward, vanishing as abruptly as it had appeared. Lucian's amber eyes narrowed in concentration, but there was nothing to see, no footprints, no broken branches, no hint of form. The attacker had literally become part of the air. Instinct and spirit sense alike had betrayed him. This was top-tier concealment. Magic so refined it melded completely with the surroundings. Yet the power of that strike was surprisingly weak. Had the blade been sharper or thrown harder, it would have pierced through his defenses. Even then, his body's rapid regeneration would have knit the wound closed in seconds. Lucian calmed his breathing and brushed dust from his robes. He dabbled in invisibility himself, but his simple shroud could fool only common folk, and even peers at the Laotianchi level saw right through it. Clearly, there was much to learn from this phantom's technique. If Lucian hoped to survive and to surpass every rival, he would have to master an invisibility far more potent than his own. Chapter 480, The Terrible Cat Scylla, Update 1. After Lucian had effortlessly dispatched the first 3 attackers, the remaining 5 warriors knew they could not afford another failure. Judge Val, the Empire's foremost mechanical alchemist, stepped forward and intoned an incantation. His body liquefied into molten metal, only to refashion itself into an impossibly sleek, battle-hardened automaton. Form shift, ultimate armament. He boomed in a voice that reverberated like a steel drum. At his side, Brandish, known far and wide as the Dread of the Fallen Kingdom, wove a massive form enhancement spell. Arcane runes flashed in the sky as Val's already imposing frame ballooned to a staggering height of 10,000 meters. From atop nearby peaks to the furthest horizon, clouds parted and winds howled under the sheer scale of the behemoth. Val raised a colossal, gear-laced hand and let out a triumphant laugh. "Crush him for me!" Lucian tilted his head, whiskers twitching at the sight of that gargantuan mechanical palm descending like a celestial mountain. The ground quaked beneath his paws. "Well," he murmured with a playful glint in his amber eyes, "it's a good thing I'm not exactly short myself." Channeling every ounce of his giant magic lineage, Lucian's lithe feline form began to stretch. Muscles rippled and bones elongated as his striped fur bristled into a living tapestry of power. In mere heartbeats, he matched Val's towering height, 10,000 meters of coiled energy and razor-sharp claws. The sky grew dark with swirling tempests of arcane force, and the very air crackled with anticipation. 2 titans now faced off in a battle that would shake empires. The labored breaths of onlookers faded into silence, for neither mechanical perfection nor ancient magic would yield easily. Lucian's tail lashed, eyes glowing with feral determination, ready to meet Val's crushing blow head-on. The clash of cat and machine was moments away, and the Empire would never be the same. A sudden sense of déjà vu rippled through the clearing, as though a towering humanoid mech were preparing to challenge Godzilla. Except in this case, it was Catzilla. Val's voice rang out, sharp and mocking. "You might be able to grow in size, but your flesh will never hold a candle to my machinery." With a fierce cry, the little golden cat swelled into a colossal feline behemoth, its claws slashing through the air to intercept Val's incoming strike. Val's smug expression flickered. In an instant, his forearms transformed into massive hydraulic pile drivers, and he thundered a rapid series of blows toward Lucian's cat-like visage. At the same time, the alchemical rune circle behind Val pulsed with energy, spitting out a stream of magically forged missiles that arced around Lucian, aiming straight for the back of his head. Turn, Lucian thought, and with a graceful twist of will, he seized control of the very projectiles meant to kill him. The missiles curved through the air in perfect synchronization, avoiding Lucian's vulnerable spots and striking Val squarely in the face. The impact was savage. Val staggered, half his mask-like visage blown away by the alchemical force. "Fix that for me!" Val snarled, staggering on uneven footing as he reached to repair the damage. Before he could conjure a response or launch a counterattack, Val discovered his limbs locked rigid. Plates of gleaming metal had fused to his arms and legs, pinning him where he stood. Lucian rose to his full, towering height. His massive golden paws flexed and retracted, each movement resonating with controlled power. In the hush that followed, the giant cat's eyes glowed with calm confidence, ready for whatever came next. Lucian's ears flattened as Val's shattered form collapsed into a mangled heap of metal and wires. No sooner had the defeated constructs clattered to the ground than an ocean of inky, poison-laden water surged toward him. At its helm stood the death god Bradman, eyes blazing with triumph. "Heaven and earth's darkness," he thundered, unleashing a cataclysmic tide of black water spiked wide, the corroding skull-shaped motes and rippling magic barrier particles. Lucian's golden barrier flared into being at his paws, separating him from the assaulting torrent. As the corrosive onslaught slammed against his ward, the barrier held firm, shimmering like a living shield. The orange cat drew in a rattling breath, then roared, "Begone!" From his open jaws erupted a twisting column of flame in shifting hues of crimson, violet, and amber. The firestorm ripped through the poison tide, vaporizing the black water and shattering every arcane mote into ash. Before the echoes of that blast could even fade, a second assault came hurtling toward him. The war concubine, imbued with the soul of the god of time, had seized the moment while Lucian's strength was still recovering from subduing Val. Chanting an ancient incantation, she drove her sword forward, its blade humming with temporal energy. "Time mark!" she cried, and the very air around Lucian seemed to warp and slow, each heartbeat stretching out like an eternity. Lucian's golden barrier flickered under the pressure of her spell. He stretched every sinew, cat-quick, to brace himself against this new assault. The war concubine's blade glowed, eager to slice through his defenses, and Lucian knew that if he faltered now, he would be caught in her web of frozen moments. Gathering his resolve, he crouched low, prepared to counterattack before time itself could hold him captive. "Can time magic really work like this?" the war princess demanded, eyes widening as she watched her spell take effect on Lucian. In an instant, every wound he had ever suffered in countless battles seemed to fuse into his current body all at once. This was the dreaded time reversal spell, designed to send one's injuries cascading backward through time. Yet Lucian only paused briefly, his expression almost amused rather than writhing in pain. "Why isn't it working?" the war princess whispered in confusion. She had expected horrific screams, a body convulsing under unbearable agony, nothing like the still, steady breath before her. Lucian surveyed her with a calm smile. "Because those past injuries are nothing compared to who I am now." At her incredulous look, he continued, voice low and confident. "The mark of time is indeed potent. If you target someone with a standard lifespan, all their accumulated wounds would overwhelm them instantly. But I'm no ordinary man. I've shattered my limits in countless worlds, spawning clones, enduring trials that have accelerated my growth beyond measure." He flexed his hand, as though testing an old scar that no longer held any sting. "Even if you manage to pull every injury from my past into the present, they feel like mere pinpricks on my flesh. My regenerative prowess and strength have outpaced any damage I've ever taken. So go on, try again. You'll find it does nothing to halt me." The war princess's spell faltered mid-incantation. Magic crackled uncertainly around her fingers, then died away. Lucian's confident smile only broadened. In that moment, it was clear. No amount of time's power could undo the titan he had become. Since this is a receptive magic, the soul dwelling within your body is now vulnerable. Lucian curled his lips. "Conscript that soul and send it to my legion." Black chi erupted from his cat's claws, coiling around the war princess. With a fierce tug, he ripped out a soul laced with powerful temporal energy. The Taoist art of conscript the soul and send it to the general can seize any spirit, beasts, monsters, demons, even gods, and the essence the war princess had absorbed was no exception. In this world, it stands as the perfect counter to receptive magic. For every soul one draws in, an equally potent spirit can be extracted. The newly freed soul trembled in Lucian's grip and, awed by his power, whispered, "Such strength, I submit to your will." As the god of time yielded, Lucian's eyes flared with triumph. Its potency rivaled that of Kul, the dread serpent he had once sealed in the core Marvel realm, undeniably a spirit worth commanding. Lucian stood motionless as the bloodstained cat yawned wide, and in a single terrifying gulp, it swallowed the soul of time. A roaring pulse of magic slammed through its body. How is this possible? Across the courtyard, the Princess of War froze, her face drained of color. As the last descendant of the god of time, wielder of the Soul Clan's ultimate trump card, she'd always believed her power was inviolable. Even Jalal had only managed to defeat her in combat. He'd never dared snatch her very soul, and now it had been devoured. She lunged forward, unleashing a torrent of temporal blades, but before her magic could even materialize, a second attack struck from the shadows. A pale, grinning corpse emerged. Nineheart, master of mind-piercing sorcery. With a flick of his skeletal fingers, he attempted to read Lucian's thoughts and summon the hero's deepest fears to life. Yet Lucian didn't flinch. Nineheart's rune-etched air shattered against an invisible barrier surrounding Lucian's mind. The corpse's confidence collapsed. "Mind tricks," Lucian murmured, voice low and cold. "Real power doesn't need illusions." Before anyone else could react, a chilling laughter rolled over them like thunder. From the sky descended Serena the Storm God, her 8 arms crackling with energy. In each hand, she wove a different dragon-slaying spell, time rifts, spatial ruptures, poison alchemy, silent assassination wards, fusing them into a single cataclysmic onslaught aimed straight at Lucian. He tilted his head, studying her for a heartbeat. Then, with the faintest smirk, Lucian raised a single hand and let the world shatter around him. Lucian steadied himself. Now that Serena and the others were bound by his sealing runes, their magic had lost much of its potency. Serena still believed that unadulterated destruction was the ultimate form of sorcery. Her signature technique, 8 Dragon Scattering, unleashed 8 draconic spells in perfect synchronization, a force rivaled only by the Empire's twin armaments in pure devastation. 8 Dragon Scattering! Serena's roar split the air as 8 fiery dragon-shaped vortices hurtled toward him like falling stars. No ordinary counter would suffice. Serena answered her own attack with a second spell. Super Magic Fairy's Glory. A maelstrom of glittering energy formed in front of her, threatening to engulf Lucian entirely. Even weakened, she dared him to meet her head-on. Lucian's eyes glowed as he drew on every reserve of his power. Super Magic Fairy's Law. Brilliant, crystalline light arced across the sky, then crashed down between the 2 mages. Serena's twin assaults shattered against it in a thunderclap of raw, arcane force. The backlash threw her off her feet, and she crashed back first into the scorched earth, grievously wounded. He lowered his staff. It's finished. On the far side of the battlefield, August and Irene raised their staves, dark runes flickering at their tips. With Serena out of the fight, they were Lucian's only remaining foes. He squared his shoulders, readying himself for the final strike.